I'd like to call the meeting to order. That works for everyone? We'll begin with a roll call. Sherry, could you do the roll?
Richard DeLong,
Here.
Dennis Bryan,
Here.
Nigel Bain, Art Henderson, Mary Corpy, Bob Felder,
Here.
John Snow.
Here.
Thank you. We have 6 of the 7 commissioners, so we have a quorum. If everyone would join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It's now time for the public to talk. Do we have any public comments?
Wow, get in line.
Please line up.
Mike?
Formal line.
All right. We have no public comments. We'll now move on to item number 1, agenda. Looking for an approval of the agenda. Is there any discussion of the content of the agenda? Any items to delete, add, or modify? Chair would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion's been given and seconded. Any additional comments? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have an approved agenda. Item number 2 are the minutes. I'm sure everyone's had an opportunity to review them. Any comments? Hearing none, Chair would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion's carried unanimously. Moving on to new business. First, item A, presentation of the 2017-18 Exploration Survey. Mike, I think we get to hear from you.
Good afternoon, Commission. If we could have the exploration PowerPoint that's in the lower center turned on, please.
Did we get a copy of that?
Very bottom center, to the right. There you go. All right. Well, I just want to summarize some of the results from the recent 2019 Nevada Mineral and Energy Resources Exploration Survey.
Mike, could you flip on your mic? You're a little soft.
Okay. Words. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to review the results of the 2019 Exploration Survey. Talk louder.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. It's such a small group.
It's a cavernous room, though.
It is cavernous. This is the third survey that has been sort of undertaken by the Nevada Bureau of Mines and Geology. Prior to that, there were several surveys done by NDOM. And so we have a running record of surveys now. If you can, actually,
Can you dim some lights?
Go to slideshow, yeah.
Looking up towards that light is kind of bothersome.
Click the left button. There we go.
okay, there we go. Okay. So anyway, we conducted this survey, the third one conducted by the NBMG, many before that conducted by NDOM. And if we can go to the next slide here, see if this works. Not sure this advancer is working. Maybe you can just click. Yeah, thank you. Just with the arrow key. The down key, maybe?
There we go.
Okay. The survey was conducted online between December 2018 and January 2019. And really, the surveys are designed for a couple of reasons, mainly to assess the minerals and energy exploration climate, in this case for 2017, 2018, and then also provide a minimum estimate of exploration's impact on Nevada's economy in terms of total spending, so direct spending by exploration companies and direct employment by those companies, so not including third parties, contractors, vendors, and that sort of thing, just direct employment. If we can go to the next slide, please. I don't expect you to be able to see all the fine text here. Okay, thank you, sir. This is the survey, online survey, 3 pages long, 5 main questions. The first 2 questions pertain to a company's spending in 2017 and 2018, and also their direct employment. Question 3 has to do with how those companies divvied out their exploration expenditures, okay, whether, what percentage of their expenditures went to actual physical exploration, i.e. drilling and such, or went to land holding costs, environmental compliance, and corporate costs. Question 4 had to do with whether the companies, or what percentage of those expenditures the companies spent in Nevada went toward raw or grassroots exploration versus brownfields or development of existing resources. And then question 5 was covered a broad range of impacts to exploration as perceived by exploration companies, and those impacts could be things like the influence of commodity prices, the favorability of Nevada geology to support exploration, the potential for new discovery in Nevada, a lot of different factors, and access to public land, which is always something that explorers are concerned with here in the state. Oop. Okay, in terms of how the survey was organized, I have a database of about 315 companies operating or recently operating in Nevada. This is always changing. Small companies in particular change management, they change names, new companies come in, old ones leave. So this is constantly being updated. From this list of 315, we received online email responses from about 148 companies, and another 24 companies were researched online by me to get their financial data pertaining to expenditures here in Nevada. So all told, we had about 172 companies that we have expenditures data for, okay, for this particular survey. You all know this graph really well. I thought I'd just show it to you as a lead-in to the survey results. Nevada is #1 in the country in terms of the value of minerals and energy products it produces, not including petroleum. So in 2017, about $8.5 billion was produced here in Nevada. And one of the things I want to point out here is that, yes, you know, precious metals comprise the majority of production in the Silver State. But you can see that from the color bars that there are a lot of other commodities that influence Nevada's production profile as well. So some things like silver, copper, barite, diatomite, geothermal energy all coming into play here. Commodity prices are another major factor affecting whether or not one explores in Nevada. This graph from 2011 to the present shows you the commodity prices that are factored in here. Everything's factored so that they fit on the graph, but the curves are all relative, and they show you what's happened over the last few years with regard to various metals and other products. And you can see lithium and other energy products have risen dramatically, thus more exploration in Nevada for those particular products, vanadium also. The gold price, along with copper, are down from peak values in 2011, but you can see the curve is starting to change slowly, and so we seem to see that changing and rising price for those commodities in the graphs and also in exploration spending. Okay, so let's move on to the survey now and what results we have in terms of spending in 2017 and 2018. Out of 172 companies surveyed, so this is a minimum. In 2017, there was $351 million in exploration-only spending. And look at 2018 is dramatically up, about 31.5%. From 2017 at $461 million. So we do see that we're off the bottom of spending in 2016, and things are seemingly looking up for exploration expenditures in Nevada. Really for most commodities, minus geothermal energy, which saw its peak in commodity prices around 2011, 2012, and since have fallen back quite a bit. Copper, you'll notice in red, rose fairly dramatically. A lot of that is due to the development at Pumpkin Hollow in the Yarrington district. And then also in green, you can see the increase in energy metals, lithium and vanadium, over the last several years. Okay, in terms of breakdown of commodities, about 77% of exploration expenditures in Nevada 2018 were for gold and silver, so $353 million. But then you can see the slices of pie for the other commodity groups. Base metals, about 15% of the total. Energy metals rising at about 5%, and geothermal energy dropping down modestly to about 3%. Not much in the way of industrial minerals or petroleum exploration went on in Nevada in 2018, which is different than a few years ago in 2012 when Noble Energy got into the scene for fracking here in Nevada. So they've since exited, and the oil prices have been quite a bit lower. Okay, this graph just shows exploration expenditures based on essentially the size of the company. So everything is divided up on the bottom axis by the amount of expenditures that companies recorded in the exploration survey. So you can see a whole bunch of different bins. The left-hand side shows companies that spent less than $100,000. So a lot of these are single-man operations or have a few employees, and quite a few companies are like that, almost 42 or so prospector-type companies. And then spending more than $100,000, you can see the curve is pretty much a normal bell-shaped distribution from companies that spend up to $250,000 all the way through companies like Newmont and Barrick that spend more than $10 million. So most companies spend on the order of between $1 and $2.5 million on Nevada exploration, but then we have companies that spend appreciably more or appreciably less. Okay, but pretty normal distribution. How does all this in Nevada relate to the rest of the world? Nevada mirrors the rest of the world. So there aren't any real flyers there. I think this graph shows pretty nicely the ups and downs of the global expenditures, which amounted to about $10.1 billion in 2018. But you can also see that globally, exploration was at its bottom in 2016. So Nevada and the rest of the world, pretty similar. The amount of increase in Nevada from 2017 to 2018 was much greater. So exploration expenditures in Nevada went up almost 32%. Exploration expenditures in the world went up on average only 18%. So here in Nevada, we're doing good. I think it's a low-risk environment for a lot of explorers, and they find that attractive along with its prospectivity. And this just shows you how the world is divvied out in terms of where it puts its exploration dollars. And the thing to focus on here is the US in red, which comprises about 9% of the global expenditures for exploration, but Nevada comprises more than half of the US exploration expenditures, okay? So Nevada's a small place geographically, I mean, when you compare it to the rest of the world, but it really generates a lot of exploration interest, and it generates a huge amount of production. Okay, let's jump to the employment picture. These are survey data from the Bureau from 2011 and then 2015 through 2018. And you can see the employment numbers really mimic the exploration expenditures, of course. And we're starting to see exploration employment rise significantly. And so it was nearly, I can't read that graph, but I think it's pushing 800 for personnel actually directly employed by exploration companies or exploration departments within larger companies. This graph is, I'm not sure I should go over it very much, but it just divides that employment by companies and the number of employees in exploration those companies have. And you can see that the lion's share of employment is for companies that are smaller, employ essentially less than 5 to as many as 20. And then there are a few very large companies that employ more than 20 people in their exploration departments. I mentioned earlier how much exploration goes on in Nevada with regard to grassroots, that is looking for entirely new deposits versus expansions on known deposits. And in 2018, you can see the ratio is about 39% for grassroots, about 61% for expansions. And this differs a fair amount from 2011, wherein about 33% was spent on grassroots exploration. So that's interesting. It seems to be a little bit of a shift towards more and more grassroots exploration. Certainly the lithium space is almost entirely grassroots. And I think across the board, we're seeing more interest in grassroots exploration now versus 5 or 6 years ago. Oops. Okay. The survey also wanted respondents to break down their expenditures based on a number of items that you can see here. 66% of expenditures on the whole, so all the money tallied, went into the ground, essentially into exploration, including exploration labor. Holding costs amounted to about 15%. Permitting and compliance, about 7.5%, corporate expenses, about 8.5%, and other expenses, only 3%. And then finally, we wanted to know what the outlook was for explorers in Nevada for this year. and whether or not companies were planning to spend more, spend less, or spend about the same. And the answer is that there was clear evidence that companies wanted to spend as much or more on exploration this year than last. So that's a good sign, but I think you can also temper that a little bit in that exploration geologists are generally optimists, and so I think they're always looking to spend more. Whether or not they actually get to is still a question. Okay, and then finally, on the impacts of various factors on exploration, you can see here I've gotten a number of factors listed and various colors. The red colors are factors that almost always are negative factors, in that people generally think of them as negatively influencing their ability to explore in Nevada. They include things like uncertainty over the U.S. mining law, time and costs required to permit, and claim fees and leases. So, those fees involved in holding property. Really only one sort of gets into what I consider to be the high impact range, and that would be time and costs required to permit. That's always an issue among explorationists. It never gets easier, it seems. We've been sort of saddled with greater permitting and compliance regulations over the past couple of decades, and people are still worried about that. Going down now to the yellow bars, these can sort of favor either positively or negatively, depending on your viewpoint, I suppose. Commodity prices, when they're up, they're great, and when they're down, they're not so great. And you can see their impact is sort of modest. Access to public land in Nevada is very important to exploration geologists and those doing exploration in Nevada. And I think in general, that particular factor is regarded as negative, in that there are numerous initiatives for land withdrawals in Nevada that negatively impact the ability for explorers to explore in the state. And so I think you see that reflection here. And then finally, the factors that are positive in general are no surprise to this group. Nevada's potential for new discovery and Nevada's favorable geology for ore deposits is considered very high and is shown here. Okay, and then this is, I think, the last slide. Comments were also solicited from people who took the survey, and you can see here what were the most important negative factors in their efforts to explore Nevada. The time and cost to permit was a negative response among 33 folks. Sage grouse and other land withdrawal issues solicited 12 responses. High claim fees were from 8. Uncertainty over the U.S. mining law reform contributed 6 responses, and then lesser responses for environmental regulations and water regulations. So just to summarize then the 2019 exploration survey, there was a major increase in exploration of about 31% year over year from 2017 to 2018. Increases were felt mainly in precious base metals and energy metals. Geothermal and industrial minerals were pretty flat. And spending increases were broadly distributed among companies of varying size, which I think is very important to note. And then spending in Nevada was higher in 2018 compared to the global increase of only about 18 to 20%. Nevada exploration company labor increased about 21% year over year during that time frame of the survey, and the outlook for 2019 is good. Companies plan to spend as much or more, generally speaking. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions or comments for Mike?
I have a comment. unrelated, well, a little bit related. Is this on? I read something recently, this is just an interesting fact. I think it was in the SEG newsletter, that Dan Wood article from January, and he said, I think it was maybe in the last 10 years, there's been $65 billion spent exploring to discover $30 billion worth of metal. Did you read that?
Yes.
It's kind of daunting. Like something's got to give, right? That's not a sustainable metric. So anyway,
Yeah.
just thought that was
Well, I
interesting.
think, and you can go into a philosophical sort of discourse on why that is, but a lot of it has to do with the maturity of major mining districts and jurisdictions around the world, and actually taking more risk to explore, and so spending more money, but perhaps reaping the rewards of that greater expenditure. So you have to even spend more, perhaps, to see some results.
Well, that's like gambling. I mean, the casinos don't lose money, so more money is expended
Yeah.
to take a chance. So the winnings are a lot less than the total input, so.
Any other comments or questions about the survey? We do appreciate the commission's support of the survey. It's run every 2 years, and right now we have a consistent way of getting responses every year, and I think that's good in terms of building some kind of idea of what the expenditures are and the impacts of exploration on Nevada's economy.
Thanks,
Thanks very
Mike.
much.
Appreciate it. Item number B on new business is the Las Vegas Natural History Museum update. Lucia, I think you're going to give the presentation, please.
So Garrett's on military leave, so I'm actually giving this for him. So if you have any questions, I'm probably not the one to batter with them, but we can get a hold of Garrett.
Mr. Chairman, while we're waiting for that to get set up there, I would, following up on Mr. Russell's presentation there, we did take that one-page summary and included it with several other documents that we had printed this year and sent a copy of it to every one of the legislators the day before Exploration Day, so that they had it in their office that day. And I know some of them commented that they did open it up and they did read it, you know, the package. So it was, and Exploration Day was very, very well attended. The comments that I heard were that it was the best, you know, entry as you go in the legislature off to the right. It was the best attended of the groups that have been there in the legislature so far, because there was members of the Nevada Minerals Exploration Coalition and some of us from the commission and all, and they were giving away free rocks and minerals. John Price was there giving away these, and it was just jam-packed almost all day there. And most of the time, you don't see that many people go to those tables, but that day was really good, really exceptional. A lot of senators and assemblymen and a lot of interest. Okay, thanks.
That's good, thank you.
Okay. So an overview of the presentation, we'll go over an update since the February meeting, final sketches of the museum exhibit, a rough timeline, an RFP update, and questions which we'll forward to Garrett. Okay, so the museum could not secure adequate funding to move to their new location. The new plan is to use the donations towards updating the current museum. It would still like to incorporate the CMR exhibit at the current location. The possibility of moving to a new venue at a future date. No changes in the design of the exhibit are necessary. The color scheme, the font have not been built into the design at this point. So the final sketches, hand samples of various rock types and descriptions of their forming environments and individual characteristics are going to be provided on this, oops, wrong thing. Maybe this thing. Do I have a pointer? They can't see when you point to that. Oh, right. Good point. So the square, the red square all across there will be the rocks and their depositional environments and individual characteristics. The plan is to have push buttons within each rock area to light up its rock-forming environment on the cross-section shown on the top. And some rocks may play a sound as well, maybe a volcanic explosion sound for extrusive rocks or ocean waves lapping for the sedimentary rocks. On the right, they might try to put some sort of rock core activity. We saw a really cool one at, that they almost incorporated at the Children's Museum here in Reno, where they would have a drawn geologic cross-section, and then you would actually pull out a core sample, and they could see the layers. So we thought about incorporating something like that into the display. And I believe, if I recall correctly, a lot of this design came from the museum that they have at the Capitol, the one that that you requested us to go to. What is it called? The Nevada State Museum? No, the one upstairs where the accounting person is, by the Gwynn Room.
The new museum in
Yeah.
the old Senate chambers
There it
at the
is.
Capitol building, yes.
Yeah, so a lot of these displays, they have some really nice displays up there, kind of designed off of these with maybe like a glass top up top where the cross-section is, and then kind of an angled white place where we can have interactive things for people to view. So the side of the rock table focuses on the rock cycle, talking about the 3 types of rocks, fossils, and has a guessing game where people can try to identify a rock. They can attempt to identify and see if it's igneous, metamorphic, or sedimentary, along with other questions. A TV screen will be in the middle of the table, and we can have different videos ready to play that talk about how rocks form and their characteristics. So this side of the minerals table focuses on mineral uses. We can use some sort of minerals in your home graphic, like the ones that we give out in the teacher's workshop. I keep trying to use the pointer. Or we can use, or find another one, or we can possibly make one ourselves. Maybe another example would be better. Next to that is a medium-sized touchscreen monitor with the Nevada Mining Association's virtual mine tour. Next to that is some sort of breakdown of what a cell phone or an iPad, what it looks like on the inside, and it would show all the different minerals that are used to make that. And next to that would be a matching game where people can match the mineral with the object that contains the mineral. They can use little RF devices that light up green when the correct choice is made, and red with a big buzzer. I'm just kidding, just red if the wrong choice is made. If it was my design, it would have a big buzzer. This is the minerals property sheet where we talk about the physical and chemical properties of minerals and how to test them. The plan is to have a black light box on that, just a little maybe 1 foot by 1 foot square black light box on the part that's angled down that people could look in and see the fluorescing minerals. Next to that would be a testing area where people can test certain properties. Then there will be some minerals and hand sample for people to observe and touch. And next to that is kind of a rolling thing of cubes. They also had this at the museum in the commission chambers. You can see it in the bottom right-hand photo, where you would turn the cubes and maybe it would say something about the hardness, the crystallography, something to that effect, properties, uses, or something that's unique to that particular mineral. So these are the final sketches. So the mineral properties, the plan is also to have mineral specimens, nice mineral specimens, occupying the empty space. We had talked for a minute about having Las Vegas rock. I think they said that they would maybe donate or something, but having a Nevada sandstone, a piece of sandstone the shape of Nevada in the center. They also talked about if there's enough funding, they may include some sort of microscope on this activity where people can slide a wheel along to observe different minerals under this microscope. We have advanced past the evaluation period, so this slide is a little out of date, but it was correct when Garrett had to submit this presentation. That we did not receive any bids. Unfortunately, 2 out of the 3 companies that he spoke with at length did not receive a copy of the RFP. He's checking with purchasing on why this happened. The current plan is to spend the month of May looking over the scope of work to identify areas where we might be able to cut costs, or deciding on if we need to stick with making 1 display for now versus 2. Garrett said he would like to send the materials back to purchasing by the end of May to get the bidding process started again. The museum does not need the exhibit anytime soon. They currently are not making any renovations on other exhibits and are still in the planning stages themselves. Garrett says he would like to have the exhibits delivered to them by June of 2020 at the latest. So bidding ended 4/26/2019. No bids were submitted. He's speaking with the design companies to identify ways of making the project feasible. He has had meetings by phone with 4 design companies regarding ways to make the project feasible so that they would take it on. He doesn't think that we're far off when considering our funding and what we're asking for, but he'll know more mid-May, and then he will talk after his military week. I think the only other note that I see he says, unfortunately, most companies that do this are not Nevada state vendors, and submitting a bid can be costly for these companies. If they see a slim profit margin, they won't even consider jumping through hoops, is what he's thinking. Questions that we can ask Garrett? I don't know if I'll have a whole lot of answers on what happened with the bidding process or what the companies are saying.
Question, do you know why the bids didn't go to those companies?
That he's asking purchasing to
Okay.
see what happened. Anything else? All right.
Thanks, Lucia. Yeah. We'll go to new business item C, update on internal controls for abandoned mine lands public. Rob?
Okay, Rob Galeri for the record. I put one of these packets in front of you guys today before the meeting. We could have an entire commission meeting going through this whole thing in detail, but we're gonna kind of skim through a lot of it right now and hit the key points. So the internal controls is a state requirement. Every agency has them and department as well. So oil and gas geothermal has theirs, AML program, bond pool. We all have our own internal controls. And the first 3 pages are reviewing what our internal controls are and inventorying, securing, and researching claimants, as well as the 3rd page talks about the number of AML mineral education presentations per full-time employee of 18 and a minimum of 70% of all the hazards inventoried in the state being secured. And we've been surpassing that for a long period of time. We've been sitting around the 80% mark for quite a few years now. So the next one we're gonna go to, let's see. Forgot about this. So flow charts. If you go to the flow charts tab, Mike, I think, put this the best. This is the hit by bus file. So if all the AML staff disappears, this breaks down the entire program step by step of how to operate the AML program. It was really key to update this when we were updating our database when we contracted it out. They found this extremely helpful to design the database the way that we actually function as a program. So it goes through every step. Sorry for the small text, they're supposed to be on 11 by 17s. But from inventorying, from office work for planning how to inventory, to going out in the field to actually performing the inventory work, to coming back in the office to doing research work, then notifications, all the way down to notifying the BLM and Forest Service on our annual reports to them. It's very helpful for staff who are coming in on research, as well as helpful for the interns to kind of give them that flow chart of what to do in the field, so they always can't say, well, I didn't know what to do next. It's really broken down, detailed on that. The next is what we updated was the current statistics. So currently with the division, the entire division, we kind of broke down the estimated FTE per employee. Overall, we came out to just above 3 full-time employee equivalents. This includes everything from Valerie paying the contracting bills to purchasing or helping with supplies, Sherry with hiring, and HR, the interns, to Courtney in the field, to Lucia and the amount of database management and data for the interns and education outreach for that, specific to just AML. So just 3.4 full-time employee equivalent is what we came up with on that. Currently in the state, 22,600 sites have been inventoried. 6,000 have been closed, 12,000 fenced or safeguarded, and 4,500 are not secured. Out of those, 65% are federal land, 32% private, with patented being a large portion of those, and 3% other. Out of the, 29% of all the hazards are the orphan, so on federal land without a claimant. And out of that, 89% of them are currently marked secure. So we focus our securing efforts on the orphans, and we're doing a good job of that, leaving only 11% of those unsecured, and we focus our intern work on doing a lot of the orphan securings. We've identified over 85,000 non-hazardous features, so these are historic mining features that we don't find hazardous. But the keynote to take away with that is initially the program didn't capture the non-hazards. We started capturing it in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And last time this was ran in 2007 to 2010, it was a 1-to-5 ratio. For every 1 hazard, there's 5 non-hazards. Now we're at a 1-to-9 ratio. For every 1 hazard, there's 9 non-hazards. There's a couple of things behind that. One is we're going back to previously inventoried areas and clearing them. So we're just capturing a lot more of the non-hazards that are left behind, as well as it may lead to that there's actually less hazards than we initially anticipated in the state. And we think we're roughly, well, we're below 50% complete on inventory efforts at the current estimate of 50,000 hazards and 300,000 mine-related features. And the next one's just, we're gonna go real quick, the graph of discovered and secured by year. 1989 was a big inventory year when it was all contracted out to a few different people. And then 2011 and 12 were the highest securing years, and that was 2011 when they introduced a mass mail out that notified the claimants to do the securing work. In 2011, over 700 of those sites were secured by the claimants alone. Okay, next one's topo prioritization. So why do we go where we're going every year? We actually prioritize every topo quad in the state. Let's see, is there a way to click it on this? It's actually a movie if you go to the bottom left on your screen. What this movie is going to show is the topo rank in the state from 2011 to 2019, just a color coding. There it goes. And as you can see, it changes. You should be seeing the colors go down from red to yellow, green, hopefully blue. A few sites have actually gone up, and that's because of inventorying sites that we didn't know existed in that area. But with that said, you could see the overall 2011 to 2019 decrease in the hazard ranking of all these topo quads. Main issue is always the Esmeralda Triangle. We could spend the next 5 summers there nonstop and not even come close to finishing that area.
Why is that?
That area just happens to have the most amount of abandoned mines. It was because of the Tonopah Gold Field.
So, no, sorry, it's more of why are they getting the high ranking? I understand there's a lot, but,
Because they have the most amount of and historic mining features noted on maps and the most amount of hazards known on the maps.
Okay.
It's just the highest density area
Okay.
of abandoned mine sites.
it's not public access, it's a density issue.
Nope, and so this, I'll skip ahead to this one right here. So the rank is only broken out by the amount of NV points or historic mining features, the ones that are left to investigate, so the approximate amount of points that have been evaluated, and then an end-all modifier. So we know sites near Tonopah, I forget the name of Topo Quad, has 1,500 NV points, but we know out of that 1,500, probably 1,490 of them are dozer cuts. So we reduced that one because we know it's not going to be as high as others. And then after we get the rank, then we go to the certain areas, and then that's when we break in the percent importance of the secured versus unsecured, orphan ranking, proximity to town. So after we get the rank, then we further break it down to which one should we focus our efforts on there. But this slide right here, it's showing every topo quad since 2011 that we have done work on, and the amount has been reduced. So we've covered a huge portion of the state since 2011. And if you look in 2019, we have 0 topo quads that are ranked 7. In 2011, we had 11. We had 20. In 2019, we have 6 that are, or 21 that are ranked 6. And in 2011, we had 72. So overall, we're reducing the amount of ranking, and that means we are inventorying more and more and identifying more sites. Okay, the next one will be interns. The intern program. So it started in 2000 with just 2 interns. It was mainly focused on inventory efforts only. Since then, we've hired 108 individual university students. That's including this summer as well. We've had quite a few of those come back and be returnees, but 108 individual college students have come through the AML program, internship program since 2000. It's a very effective program, but it is a very time-consuming program for staff. The amount of time, energy for the recruitment, the hiring, the planning, the time spent in field every week, there's staff members with them in the field, as well as data entry while they're in there, as well as cleaning the data afterwards and reporting. It's a very effective program, but it is time consuming. You can see though, from 2007 to 2018, the interns have secured nearly 3,000 hazards. They've inventoried almost 6,000, and they've inventoried over 50,000 non-hazardous features. They get a lot of work done in a very short time period in 13 weeks. We introduced the winter intern program, or WinTerns, in winter 2015. It's been very effective. And we mainly focus the work in Southern Nevada and Clark County, where the inventory has mostly been done. It's a lot of revisits and cleanup work, as well as fencing work down in Southern Nevada. The next slide is 2007 to 2018 intern work. 2016, we had a very abnormal group. These guys were amazing. There was a group of 6, and they broke almost every record with just 6 of them. That end of that summer, we introduced the tablets at the very end of the summer. You could see the effectiveness in 2017 and 2018 by introducing the tablets and doing full digital data in the field by looking at the statistics right here on this graph.
Interesting.
And right here is our 2019 intern schedule. The areas that we're going to be focusing work on throughout the summer, as well as where they're going, the dates, and what staff members are going to be with them during that time. Okay. The next one is the securings and revisits. So going back to this graph right here again, hazards discovered and secured by year. 89 was a contract year. 2011 and 12 were the mail out. And so if you go to the next slide, this breaks it down, securings from 2007 to 2018 by division, our contractor, claimants, BLM, Forest Service, volunteers, and then everybody else lumped together in one. And with that, it's how many securings a year they did, the percentage that they completed that year, and then the overall. So overall, we, in the last 11 years, we've averaged 1,018 securings in the state, with 241 of those being closures, either back compatible or backfills, and 777 being fencings or postings. In 2011, the claimants with that mail out, they performed 745 or 42%. So that was the biggest year with the claimants. On average, the division, they secure roughly 40% of all the securings per year. In 2017 and 2018, we've actually been over 50% each year in the amount of securings done that year by average. Here's another graph just showing the backfills or puffs by agency. We did not factor in the claimant securings on this. They vary and they're really hard to capture. A lot of times we get that data years afterwards. But with this said, the BLM did majority of the securings in 2010 through 13. But if you look in 2018, the division is actually almost surpassed the BLM. In 2017 we did, in 2018 we almost surpassed the BLM again, the amount of securings we've done for backfills. The following page is back compatible closures. Majority of it again was by BLM. Forest Service continues to do a lot of those every year. But in 2018, we actually did more back compatible closures than any other agency. And that was mainly due to Broken Hills and Gold Butte projects. Those had high number of back compatible closures. And Gold Butte was because of the amount of material needed to move around. It was actually feasible to just gate them and then try to do 2 helicopter flights, one for gating, one for foaming at same site. So we just gated some instead of backfilling or foaming them because you couldn't get equipment to them. The next slide is the number of revisits by year. So in 2007, we started going to these sites. We're realizing, Mike, when he was going through it, that a lot of them are being vandalized, that fences don't always last, they're temporary. We know they're temporary, so they'd go to them. All these data are the revisits, so they went to them either to check the securing status or maybe to evaluate them for a closure project, to get a cost estimate or something like that. So here's our numbers for that time frame. But what it leads to is this next slide, the amount of multiple securings. So we graphed in the cumulative hazards secured versus actual hazards. So actual hazards is, currently we have 18,000 secured, but cumulatively in the history of the program, we secured over 20,000. So Arden's a great example, right? We went there and we re-secured those multiple times and then we finally backfilled them. But with that said, there's a maintenance issue with being able to go out there and do fences and have to go back and re-fence. So we started curving, we did a best fit line, and we estimate by 2031 that half of all the securing work we're doing will be re-securing sites that were previously secured. So a way to fix that is to focus majority of the securings on orphans. So we really are focusing on one effort and most of the revisits on that. But the further we get along with this program, there's no way to not be able to do that. If we don't want to ignore what's out there, we have to go back and continue to re-fence the sites that we know are hazards that are not permanently closed. Okay, contractor work. So this breaks down a couple different things. Category 39 is our AML contractor category. So our funding source for that is category 39. We broke it down from FY11 through 19. Showing the difference of what NDOM has been able to fund during those time and what our partner funding has done. So in those 9 years, we spent nearly $2 million, but if you notice, fiscal year 18 and 19 is almost half that budget alone, just those 2 years. And out of that, the division funded just over $1 million and our partners have funded just below $1 million. So it's a 45% partner funded. So we've been able to utilize partner funding really well in our contracting for our program. The bottom graph shows our current partner funding sources. The main one being the BLM. Currently our agreement is $750,000. We've utilized $285,000, but that $750,000 isn't guaranteed. That's just saying that they have the authority to give us up to $750,000 under that contract. Right now, we've requested $100,000 a couple months ago, and we know we won't get it until closer to October, near their closeout, because everything over 50 grand requires DC's approval. So it's a slow process, and it's not a guaranteed process. For the Forest Service, we mainly focus that on inventory and fencing, and it's a reimbursement policy. Desert Conservation was for back compatible closure in Clark County, and it's ending this December. And then Clark County Real Property was the Arden closures, which has been exhausted already. So our contractor work, this is just EPS's work from 2009 to 2019. $1.7 million has been spent on contracting through EPS, with over 30,000 sites being worked on, 400 plus hard closures, and over 700 fencing. So a lot of work is done through our contractor, gets a lot of stuff done, and I averaged the contracting cost from 2015 to 2019 to get an inventory or revisit cost of $130 each, fencing at $500, a back compatible closure at $7 grand. A backfill is broken out two ways because the art enclosures were so expensive and large, they kind of skewed it pretty drastically. So we have two different numbers for that, with and without Arden, 1,100 to 2,200. You can see the big difference right there, doubled it, just the art enclosures alone. An average puff, and then what I do with this is I use these numbers to forecast what it's gonna cost to do closure projects in the future. On average, it's 25 to 30% back compatible closures. They're the most expensive part of closure projects. So I said, out of 100 sites, if I'm going to a project with 100 sites, 70% of them were backfill or puff, and 30% were back compatible closure. And I came up to a cost between $3,100 and $3,500 per site per closure. So I'm using that for forecasting forward. So on the right is the current partners, on the left is current partners plus potential new partners. We're working with the Park Service, become an agreement with them so they could help fund us to do work on Park Service land. There's been multiple proposals on Good Samaritan bill, so if one of those ever goes through, there may be a funding source through that. The Army Corps RAMS program has been fantastic for our database, but it's not guaranteed to continue. And then as well as any city or county, that has the ability to step up like Clark County did this last year, able to partner with them as well. So contract and work and forecast capacity. This is starting at this date forward. So you see the remainder of FY19 at the bottom is $234,000 in projects left, for a total for fiscal year 19 would be close to $688,000. Forecasting for FY20, 21, and 22, on average around $600,000 to $700,000 per year in contracting. We think we're really close to pretty much our maximum of what we could handle with the current staffing and what we're able to take in. If we get additional funding from other sources, one of these projects that's on this, let's say Clark County comes up with another great project but it needs to be done in Clark County soon, we'd be able to prioritize and do that, but one of these other projects would drop down another year. So we'd be able to adjust them by that point. But with the staffing and the contract and where we're at, we think between $600,000 and $700,000 realistically is our maximum for Category 39 expenditures. Okay, last one, summary and forecast. So the AML program, this graph I took directly from Mike's previous time he did this. So last time this was updated was in February 2010. That had this evaluation on the AML program. So this has been really good for us to see what we've changed and what we'll be able to affect. This is from 1987 to 2009 estimate of the amount of AML features relative to full-time staff employee equivalent. So you can see the more, minus the contracting in 1989, the more staff, the more it gets done with the division. I updated this next one. This is stack chart denoting the relative numbers of AML features inventoried versus the total expenditures. And the total expenditures is salaries, contractors, materials, and everything. So you can see that the amount of work completed directly relates to the amount of funding available for the program right there. As well as the FTEs are kind of broken down on the bottom in those little in the little tables. The next slide is a little difficult to read. It's breaking down the amount of discovered, secured, and non-hazards, and then trying to forecast them out. The forecast is always going to be a smooth line because we estimate this is what our average is, and then start subtracting a percentage because we know we've gotten the low-hanging fruit. We're starting to get further and further out there. They're getting harder and harder to get to, some of these. Some, not all. So this forecasting out, and with that forecast, you see that 2057, we might be finished inventorying if we have 50,000 features by 2057. The next graph is the actual table that relates to that graph. There's a few key things that I want to note on this. When you see in the sixth column, remaining hazards to investigate, that's starting with 50,000 hazards, and the remaining features is starting at 300,000. So as you go through it to the next page, you see by 2057, we're actually in the negative for the amount of hazards left to inventory. But the problem with that is, if you look on the amount of mining-related features, we've already been in the negative since 2044. So which one of those is wrong? Do we either have more than 300,000 mining-related features, or do we have less than 50,000 hazards? It's hard to estimate. This is our best guess of what we could do until we actually complete inventory. We do not know. But with that said, and we still think there's 50,000 hazards, by 2057, just to complete inventory, this isn't completing securing, this isn't completing closures, it would cost us $91 million with adjusted for inflation, just to complete inventory by 2057, and that time the program would be 80 years old. But with that said, in 2010, when Mike last did this, the estimate was 2066. So we've actually reduced it by 9 years by just efficiency of the program has been incorporating digital data in the field, I think is a big part of that. So the last table, or the last slide, is two tables. They're the same table, minus the fact one is forecasting for 50,000 hazards, one's forecasting for 40,000 hazards. Of the cost it would take at current contracting cost to complete, the year that it would be completed, and the amount of closures. So if we were to continue at 50,000 hazards and closures at the current rate we are, the program wouldn't be finished till year 2201. But we'd still be able to complete inventory efforts by 2057 and the first time fencing by 2060. It's extremely hard to even fathom how to estimate the amount of resecurings that are going to need to be done by temporary fencing on sites. But if a current rate, we'd be done if we just fence once, it would be 2060. The inventory is by 2057 for 50,000 hazards. Questions?
Those numbers are daunting.
Yes. I don't plan to be here by then, let's put it that way.
I don't think I'll be on the commission either. It does beg the question, should we be considering increasing staff?
It's a question for Rich.
It's a question for all the commissioners too, and just, so.
I mean, that's about the only way for us to be able to increase this program at the moment is
Yep.
to be able to increase staff or reprioritize.
I appreciate the fact you're saying staff is maxed out. I definitely appreciate it, because we've been focusing on increasing productivity
Yeah.
for a number of years rather than increasing staff, and so.
Yeah, and I mean, you could see in just the contracting amount these last 2 years was 50% in the last 10 years. I mean, we spent a lot of money recently. We're still able to do it efficiently, but with the current staffing, we're starting to hit our
Right.
limits, we believe.
What I'm hearing from you is that even if we tried to bring on a second contractor, we don't have the staff to manage that. That's what I'm hearing from you. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah. We could increase this contract, but that's still going to be increasing the workload of staff. So,
I comment, and we've had a number of discussions on this one as we went through the claim fee question that we'll talk about at the end of the meeting today. And some of it is not just our resources, some of it is NDOW's and BLM's resources, because the categorical exclusions, the wildlife component of that is NDOW. So we talked about, okay, if we were to do that and we were to ratchet up, then we actually have to start contracting and paying for wildlife people and SHPO people ourselves. And we just felt like that's going to increase the cost significantly as we, exist in a world where we use their resources and they're a part of this. The other part, to answer your question, is only the legislature can increase staffing. So, that would have to go to the next session. And if we did that, then of course, we have to start looking at, okay, so how much more do we want to spend? And we would probably at some point in time have to go back and ask for additional monies in the claim fee if we really wanted to ratchet this program up. There's a lot of friction once we go beyond what we've been able to achieve, I think, at this point in time with all of the
Would you need more
improvements.
space?
What's that?
Would you need more space?
Yeah, you mean office space? I don't think we'd necessarily need more space. You know, we'd need, you know, there's different ways to look at that. You know, we could, there's options like, well, we have people who spend a fair amount of time doing classroom education, so you reroute some of their efforts there. As Rob's numbers here show, we have about 4.3 people.
3.4.
3.4, excuse me, involved in this right now of the 11 that are there. But I would arguably not recommend backing off on the public education component either. So I think we've kind of hit an optimal point here on this program. And yes, it's going to take years to work through it. But the positive part about it is it's cost effectively done every year with claim fees at no expense to the general fund. And industry's willing to continue to fund it at this point in time because they see it as a social license program.
Rich, what's the,
You need to turn your mic on. Dennis, thank you.
is it on?
Yep.
The AML program is what percent of the total budget?
Okay, so what was the number in here? 1.4 million
Yeah, in 2018.
in 2018 of a total spend of 2.2 million, so it's significant.
Yeah, it's like 60%.
Because it's a lot of our, I mean, the contracted work is a big chunk of that. You know, if you look at our budget, the average years, you know, we spend about $1 million in salaries, and then we spend $1 million in office and operating costs and various things like that, and the AML program. And the AML program has always been the one that was variable according to how much we had in claim fees. In the last 2 years, with the number of claims going up and Rob's organizational skills and all, we really were able to tackle some major projects. This last year was the biggest year we ever had. We took on 3 major projects. But fortunately, we're getting other entities, because I think we have a good reputation and we're efficient at it, who are willing to pony up 45% of the money. That didn't used to exist. That's really good. We're leveraging other people's money.
I got a couple comments for you, Rob.
Yeah.
Excellent presentation, and I thought it was pretty alarming, the introduction of the tablets and the noted increase in output and efficiency. With that, is the drone expected to have the same impact on the remote sites, the hard-to-get-to ones?
Yeah, so the hardest thing with the drone, so the interns has been super effective with the tablets, but for the interns to be able to use drones, they have to be a certified pilot. And so them to go on willingly to go study, take the test, do that. So for the interns to use it, no. But for staff, yeah, I feel naked now out not in the field with the drone, because I'm able to capture, like we worked around the Roberts Mountains this last summer. I think I got 1,000 non-hazards by myself just with a drone, being able to capture these long, big areas where I could get on a high point and fly for extended periods of time and just eliminate areas, or pick the 4 sites that we actually need to go to on the ground and eliminate the other 80 sites because they're all non-hazardous sites. It is definitely helping. It's just time and field, right? You got to get boots on the ground, and we're just getting maxed out with the amount of time we can spend in the field for that.
And that's great. You gave a good big picture overview, but what my question here is with the BLM, they have a program, they have a national contractor, and they're doing work. Is that factored into these statistics, what we've handed off to them or not?
Yeah, so the overall number is 241 sites closed annually, is including the BLM Forest Service, as well as the 777 fencing is including them and the contractors. But the overall numbers for what it would take in Nevada, currently we're the only ones doing the inventory.
Okay.
So
I mean,
BLM kind of contracts, and that's why we have the agreement, because we provide them the data.
And as a discussion point for the commission, I mean, this has been revolving for years and years and years, and ex-commissioner John Mudge used to bring this point up all the time about how to get the BLM more involved, and the $750K that they have out there, maybe we should push to have them maybe take ownership of the 29,000 orphans. They're not really orphaned if they're on BLM land.
It's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Any other discussions on this item?
Yeah, actually, one more question.
Nope.
You mentioned claimants. How does that work with areas that are claimed? Do you get claimants to fund closures, or do you get, I mean, how does that work? And do you
So
get
you
much of
have-
that to happen?
You haven't seen one of the letters that's gone to Renaissance, huh?
I've gotten them.
Okay.
Yeah,
And so what it is when we notify
but we
them-
didn't fund it. I mean, we didn't,
So,
I just was on a site that you guys closed on one of our properties recently.
and so we go out and we secure multiple times a year, right? And so when we're out there and we've determined that this is a moderate to high ranking hazard, we'll do this fencing right then and there because we feel it's a direct public safety issue at that moment, and we'll do the fencing. But the remainder of the sites is we'll come in, we'll do the research, and then actually by statute, we are the ones supposed to be notifying the owner or leasee or occupant of that site. And so at that point, we notify it to the claimants, and the claimants, we don't get a full 100% response, maybe close to 30% response. But then the claimants at that point will then either contract it out or have their staff. When I worked in exploration, I remember getting that letter too, and I went out and fenced them for the company I was working for as well. And then they'd fence them, they send the information back to us, we enter it into the database as secured by owner at that time, and that owner is then reelected to the research that we've done. And then so we capture the data there that way. And then if there was ever an incident at that site and the owner said, well, we did the work, and they say, well, look, the division has the work as well. So then there's an extra layer of liability to help protect those claimants of saying, by statute, they did what they required to prevent accidental injury on that site. Does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Okay.
So the big closures with the gates, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, fencing old,
Yeah.
open stopes and things is easy to do. Can you require, I mean, is there a way that you can require, you can just suggest that,
We could suggest, we can't require because by minimum statutes, by a fence is enough. So if the claimant doesn't want to go to backfill or closures, they're not required, only by fencing or posting. Unless the BLM, so if the BLM or us were proposing a project, let's say the project I'm working on right now is, our contractor's currently working on Mullen Pass, just north of here by Pyramid Lake, right off Pyramid Highway. So the claimants that are in there, when we submit the CX, the then BLM then re-research it, the claimants, they notify the claimant and say, if you want to keep these open, you'd have to bond for what it would cost to do the closures after you leave. So that's one way to do it, but the BLM, I think there's only been one instance that a claimant actually did bond to keep something open.
you know, I was confused because back in, it was probably 2012 or 13, we got a letter from the BLM on our project. It was Ferguson Mountain Project out by Wendover. And I called and talked to the BLM and wasn't really clear what they expected of us. And before much time went by, it had already been closed by you guys. So I was confused
that
about.
was BLM, Ferguson Mountain was the Elko BLM.
Okay,
So, yeah, they follow the protocol of notifying, and then you have allotted time to say, yes, we either want to keep it open and then do a notice and a bond for it, or no response results into closure.
okay. I guess that wasn't clear to me at the time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the BLM came up with that protocol in 2008 or 9, somewhere in there, 10, somewhere in there.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Yep.
Thanks, Rob. We'll move on to item number D under new business, the AME Roundup in Vancouver in January of 2020. Rich, you're going to give us an update on that, please?
Oh. There we go. Okay. Yes, and I will credit Mr. Wade Garrett, who's not here for a lot of the work on this, as he had an assignment to look into this and follow up since the last meeting. Since the last, at the last commission meeting, if you recall, there was a request by Commissioner Felder to look into going to AME. And we prepared some facts here just for that. I know many of you have been there, but I don't think we actually have anybody from the division that's actually been to Roundup before. So a little bit of the background here, and some justification for the Nevada presence, and this particular item is this is an action item, so we're looking for direction on whether you want us to move forward with this, and got a little budget here to do it, to start looking into going to Roundup every year. So background to it here, it's a trade show that's hosted in Vancouver, Canada, and it's attended by over 6,000 people, which is smaller than PDAC. PDAC's, I think, about 25,000 people. But it does have representatives from many different countries, just like you do PDAC, but some that are represented that aren't there at PDAC, that actually are a little more close to home for us. It's a 4-day event held in January every year, and its focus is mainly exploration. I'm not going to say that PDAC's focus is mainly mining, but it does have a bit more mining background to it, and more of the equipment vendors and so forth, but it's largely exploration too. It's put on the other government entities that are there are the BC Ministry of Energy and Mines, governments this last year of Greenland, Saskatchewan, Northwest Territories, and Yukon, Nova Scotia, and the state of Alaska. You don't see Alaska at PDAC, as I recall. I think we were the only state that was represented there. And a little bit then of,
Minnesota.
if we go into some photos of the floor in January 2019 that Garrett was able to find. And a little bit of background here, a justification that we were able to come up with. You know, certainly it fits with our statutes in 513.073, which is to encourage and assist in exploration for production of minerals within the state. Our number one Fraser rating this last year for the Fraser Attractiveness Index. You know, the fact that we're the top producer of non-fuel minerals for the state. And although PDAC is a similar event, there's a lot of continuity here in this show for the exploration community, and a lot of the Nevada exploration community attends it. Following up on the economic development part of this, it makes some sense and is consistent with trying to attract investment to Nevada. And when you saw those significant numbers there that Mike Russell presented from 2017 to 18 of a 31% increase in exploration expenditures, I'd like to think at least a little of that was the fact that we've been at PDAC for the last couple of years, and that the Fraser Index rating was too, because we were there in force with a number of different agencies collaboratively to explain how to do business in the state of Nevada. We put together a quick budget forecast here. It's not an expensive one to go to. In fact, it's less expensive than PDAC, as Toronto is always expensive. But we estimate that we could send one person up there this next year and spend about $2,500 doing that. And where would we come up with that money? Just a note in the bottom there, we budgeted in this budget that is now going through the legislature to send 3 people to PDAC for the next 2 years. We sent 3 this year, and then so we had budgeted for 3 to go the following 2 years. And I think what I do looking at that is we'd send 1 to next year up to roundup, and then send 2 to PDAC next year in order to stay within our budget limits. And the question may be, well, will we have enough money to do that? Yes, but we have to go through a lot of hoops in the state. When you go beyond a 10% variance in any one of your categories, you end up either in front of the interim finance committee or some other hoop that we have to go through in writing work programs, which we do on a regular basis, but that would keep us within our budget there. So we're recommending that we send 1 representative in 2020, in January, and those are the deliverables. This is kind of the same way we did this when we were looking at going to PDAC, send 1 person up. That was Mike originally for the first year, and then we went a second year, and then that was Garrett, and then we budgeted for the booth and executed that in the third year. So we had a presence there. And that's kind of the same approach I would be looking at here. I mean, it's possible that we might be able to accelerate that a bit after 1 year, after we have some vision of it, but it would be within this budget 2-year cycle. So we would have to go and do a budget variance, and undoubtedly we'd be in front of IFC on that one, because it would exceed what we have in our budget for trade shows. So, other questions to answer? Would the participation reasonably lead to increased exploration investment? Would it generate enough interest to be worthwhile? Is there a benefit attending Roundup and PDAC both, or will we be seeing the same people at both places? And the resource question there, long-term, right now we spend about $35,000 going to PDAC every year between the booth space and the people traveling and going up there. And we'd need to come up with a budget on this one to see if it's the same amount. I suspect it would probably be less, but some of you may know that. Rich is shaking his head because he's been there, but probably less, but we still need to come up with a budget and then usually get ourselves in sync. Remember when it was PDAC, we actually took over, in order to get in line for a space, we took over the Geological Society of Nevada's proxy for that and had to do some convincing in order to get in line. I'm not sure if this one is the same, but we'd find out. Okay, and some references that Garrett had there. So, any discussion or questions?
Yes. There's a lot of questions around this. I mean, they're only 2 months apart, not even 2 months apart, like 6 weeks apart. So there's going to be a lot of overlap. But Vancouver is really, even though a lot of the junior companies are listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, Vancouver is the hub of junior exploration activities, and that's where a lot of the money is put together. There's a lot of groups who will go raise money with their associates in Vancouver, and a lot of those groups say, I want to be in Nevada now that it's Fraser Institute #1. So there's a lot of reasons to be there. Our presence so far, and Rich, chime in if you have additions, there's been a GSN plus NMEC presence. They do it trying to poor boy it a bit, and they have a room that's not on the main floor. It's actually upstairs, and it's out of the way, and it doesn't really get as good a traffic as it could. So if after your first visit, is it going to be you, Rich, that goes, or do you know?
We haven't talked about it yet. It would probably be Mike or myself, one of the two of us.
I think a similar path could be followed. I mean, obviously it would be relying on the division for additional funding, but Rich and I agree it's a cheaper meeting to go to. I mean, exhibit space is less than Toronto. Staying in town is less than Toronto, depending on where you stay and where you eat, and all that stuff. But it would be great if the division could sort of big brother that, because, GSN's got money, but they try really hard not to spend it.
I noticed that.
Yeah. Well, that's another topic. I won't get into it.
Smart.
But, I think it's a really great place to be present and have a Nevada presence.
A question, I mean, do you believe that one is better than the other and we should be at this one and not that one, or both?
If you put a gun to my head and made me choose, I'd probably pick Vancouver.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with Bob on that, that if you had to pick one, I'd pick Vancouver. But I see a validity in both because PDAC is a little more mining focused and has a more international attendance. You know, I've always viewed Vancouver as basically a Western North America show, really focusing on the Cordilleran. And Nevada's kind of in the Cordilleran, so.
You know, another perspective from somebody who attends these conferences to try to drum up business for our company, you can never draw a direct corollary between the meeting you attended and what business it generated. I mean, oftentimes you can't. But the answer is if you aren't in the room, you definitely know the outcome and you won't have any conversations of usefulness. So it's kind of like top of mind presence. You just kind of need to be there, and over the long run, it will benefit. Sometimes you can draw that corollary, like, we went to that meeting, we met these people, and we did business with them. But sometimes it's just being in the room so that you're top of mind for people.
I believe that fully on the PDAC. I really do believe that some of the exploration increase in spend and Fraser were partially the result of the presence. We had a lot of people come visit saying it's about time. You know, I personally had calls from mid-tier mining company CEOs that asked me to their offices to talk about Nevada. I've sent special copies of the exploration survey and particularly the ore tolling report to a number of those people up there, and I think it was in the second year that started to really happen. We do track one metric. For the last 2 years, we've looked at hits on the website after PDAC. And Lucia can probably talk about those there, because there are some interesting numbers there.
Yeah, we do.
You
the
see them
same.
in the monthly report. I always put them there. I don't have a good graph of them in there, but you can see sometimes when all of a sudden the traffic on the open data site and the regular website picks up after these events.
Rich, I would think that for $2,500, I mean, it's a no-brainer. We should go, and then, based on the experience next year, make a determination.
Move something forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with Dennis. I think the $2,500 amount and what's proposed for 2020 is a no-brainer. I think there's maybe a little bit bigger issue in what 2021 and beyond looks like, because we don't have the same situation we had at PDAC, where we were able to take over an existing slot. Right now, we don't know whether we can even get in.
Right.
And so,
I don't know how that works there.
yeah, I don't either. Bob, you might know.
I think we could get in. For years, Roundup was at a hotel, and they outgrew it 5 years ago, and they finally moved into the convention center. And so I don't know this as a fact, but my thought would be there's still room to expand. I mean, that's a big facility. It's not a huge meeting. So I don't think they have the same kind of waiting list as PDAC for booth space. But again, that's just how it occurs to me. I'm not sure I'm correct, but that's what I would guess.
Okay.
And to follow up on that, I guess I would like to see trying to get on, if there is a waiting list or being able to secure, accelerate that schedule, not rather than a 3-year schedule, look at a 2-year schedule. From a fiscal perspective, we have the money to do this.
Yes.
And even if it requires going to IFC, I think it's worth it.
It always helps in our argument when we write some type of a fiscal thing that's going to go to IFC or a work program, that our commission instructed us to do this. That's one of the reasons I put it up here, because it's pretty powerful. They can't come back and say, well,
It's a boondoggle.
yeah.
And I also thought that Dave and Laura, Dave talked to me about getting different space and just saying, we just can't afford to be on the main floor. And that made me think that they could have if they wanted to spend the money in terms of availability. It was just a budgetary thing. So that'd be an easy question to ask. You can call up AME and just say, for next roundup, I mean, is there availability for new exhibitors?
We will do that.
Yeah.
Would it,
Assuming you vote and tell me to.
We vote.
would it be worthwhile
Should we
also
move?
contacting other people, the other parties that are in the PDAC booths?
It may, if we have to figure out how, if there's no availability. If there's an availability and it doesn't cost much for us to commit, I think that would be an easy thing to do. If the commitment is an amount that exceeds our expenditure authority, then we'll have to go do the work program in the IFC and so forth like that before we can commit. PDAC actually, this last year, we'll be a little bit better at it this time around, but it's a little bit messy. We have to, in PDAC, commit to the space within like 3 or 4 days after it's offered, because there's a mating season there where you go through and it says, hey, would you want to be over here? We've got some new spots over here. Here's a better place. What is it you want? And you commit. And I put $9,000 on my personal credit card to do that. And we go through all of that because we can't cut a check in the state of Nevada in a foreign country and exchange rates in 3 days. So we're actually working through getting a procurement card set up to do that so that nobody's out of pocket. Garrett's sometimes out of pocket. And then at the end of that, I have 2 checks in my briefcase from the government of Canada because they rebate you back a certain amount after it's done that are now in my name that I have to go negotiate and then write the division a check. So it's messy, but we can get it done. Yeah, and we'll know how better to get it done with Roundup, I think, because we'll probably be operating under the same rules.
Can I
my
propose
guess.
a motion then?
Yes.
I'll propose a motion.
Please go forward, Nigel.
To fund from the PDAC funding for the division to send a person to AME.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
And Rich, when you go to the IFC to down the road to ask for more funds, this is economic development.
Yeah, and the one for PDAC was and it had no problem making it through. And it had no, that one actually we put through the legislature and we had no problem because it was in our budget. We didn't go to IFC. We did it right up front because the timing was there. And we would do that here. So
And you can demonstrate from PDAC that maybe it did help.
Yes, and the Governor's Office of Economic Development is a part of it. We're funding it now. We have Joel that goes, so it's not just us as an agency. There's the economic
partners,
development
yeah.
component to it too. So that's blended very well. The fact that the BLM goes, the Mining Association, Minerals Exploration, GSN, all of those are partners in that. And that was an easy sell. Yeah.
So,
I will report back then at the next meeting
Sound like it's on?
with what we find out.
is it on?
No.
There's no little red light.
You have to look at the light right directly on to see it.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like some of the partners are already there at Vancouver that are with us in Toronto, but the Nevada Mining Association and GOED, should we let them know once you get approval that someone's going to be there too, so we can get them on board hopefully for 2021 and have that same set of partners?
Absolutely. I think Joel Lentz would be able to easily go to something like that.
Right?
Yeah.
That with evaluations by the group too, and it builds more weight.
Yep.
Rich, is there any other trade shows out there that you want to go to?
I've never been to Comic-Con before in San Diego, and I've always thought that would be pretty cool.
Find Sheldon.
Oh, yes, that's right. We go to the geothermal, every year we go to wherever the geothermal
Resource conference.
resource conference is, yeah. And it's usually Salt Lake or Sacramento or Reno.
Yep.
Is it? There we go.
Thank you,
Okay.
Rich.
Thank you.
That was very good. We'll go to the last item under new business, E, 2018 Nevada mineral, geothermal, and oil production. Mike?
Yeah, Mike Bisher for the record. So the annual status and production reports are submitted by mine operators. They're supposed to be submitted to us by April 15th. Most of those do not come in voluntarily. So we send out first notice usually in March. They're reluctant to provide those numbers much earlier because they're waiting for their annual reports to come out if they're a publicly traded company. And then if we don't get them by April 15th, then we'll send out a second notice. Sherry and Michelle have been working on those. I have 2 entities that have not yet submitted those. Actually, just one. We did receive the Black Rock Canyon, which is a nominal amount. So the 2 that are highlighted in yellow, Florida Canyon and New Gold, Nevada. At the time we put the packet together, they had not submitted theirs. But I have a placeholder for Florida Canyon because it was in their annual report. Generally, the numbers do not change significantly at all, maybe by 1 digit, and that's about it. The numbers are very close to, if not the same, that are reported to Department of Taxation, which we communicate with to make sure that there are no big disconnects between what's being reported to the agencies. But we do not necessarily audit these numbers. We will communicate with them if we cannot read their handwriting, which I had to do a number of times this year already. Or if there's a big disconnect from one year to the next, and they may inquire as to why is it significantly different. So right now, this is a draft as of April 25th. I do not expect the whole numbers to change, just the maybe down to the 100 or tens of ounces. Saying that, we had a year-over-year decrease of 13% for gold production, decrease of 5.4% for silver production, relatively flat for copper production from the 2 producers, and then 30% reduction for moly. You know, I think it's pretty reflective of what everybody has kind of seen. There's been a shift from open pit towards underground. The production usually goes down, and production usually lags a little bit behind the commodity prices. So as commodity prices go down, production goes down, but not at the same exact time, and they may go up. But this is what we have to date. The second page.
Mike, before
Yeah.
you go off of this page, just a query. We look at that, basically, it's a 700,000 ounce drop in gold.
Right.
Half of that, over half of that is from pipeline.
Right.
Do you think that's a reflection of them just going underground at Cortez Hills, or?
It was a shift in the development.
Okay.
Ease development, they had some challenges with some of the headings and some of the underground conditions. So they had some delays and shifts in how they're actually doing some production. The grade also had gone down. So the average grade of the underground had gone down for what was actually produced. So I haven't researched that in detail, but that's what I've been told to date.
Because we've got a similar drop at Arturo from 140,000 ounces to 50,000 ounces.
And that was part of the plan. So they had some higher grade near surface, and that was exhausted.
Okay.
And so there's more stripping involved to get down to the next resource level.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Second page, not quite sure why this is not showing up. Oh, thank you. So by operator, Newmont has the top billing, just barely. And the breakdown you can see as it moves on down. Because I do not have all of the production for the industrial minerals. I do not have all the reporters for gypsum. I finally received those for barite, but not in time for this report. And some of the other production I'm still waiting on. So the only thing I have to add to this discussion really is on the geothermal power production. We saw a 7% increase year over year. I do not have an average price and won't until taxation finalizes their numbers and then creates a report for us to show the actual price for what was sold. And then I'll add that to that chart. The final slide is just on the oil production, 10% drop there. I don't think that was unanticipated. Interesting to note, though, because the commodity price for oil has steadily risen, we're seeing increased activity and interest in oil in Nevada. So some new permits, some new interests, some new leases. Obviously, that's not going to hit into production right away, but it does reflect a renewed interest in oil exploration in the state. Any questions?
As a note here that the combined production of Newmont and Barrick, for gold anyway, it's 75% of all the gold produced in the state is the one company now.
I'd like to comment on that. And that's down from 91%. So it's going the other way, mainly because Barrick sold assets to Kinross. So that's the lowest it's been in some time. The other significant eye-opener that we all saw here is for the first time in many years, Newmont outproduced Barrick last year in Nevada.
And that's probably because of the operation at Pipeline was down almost 500,000 ounces.
Just quick comment, if you think about the gold production in Nevada graph, peaked in 98, it kind of came down, but we've been steady at over 5 million ounces for a long time. And this would be the first year that we drop below 5 million, but hopefully it's temporary.
Mike, I could offer an explanation for the geothermal price dip there in the center of your graph if you want to hear it.
Sure.
So what's that all about is, what caused the decrease is the incentives that the federal government had at the time were standard offer 4 contracts based on FERC providing a 5 to 10 cent incremental increase in the kilowatt power purchase agreement. So they guaranteed that, and it was for 10 years, and when it fell off the cliff, that's what you're seeing happen right there at the beginning of 2001. And then in 2005, when the legislature here in Nevada passed the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard, coupled with the fact that the BLM redid its leasing regulations in '07 is why it spikes back up. So you could kind of take that out. But what's interesting now with the passage of SB 358 in this session going to 50% RPS, we hope to see another spike up. We probably will.
Thanks, Joe.
Any other discussion on that item? Before we go into old business, let's take a break. And reconvene just before 3. that's good. No, I wanted to go, but this thing called work gets in the way.
Oh, my God. No. Yeah, right. I'm planning on it. I don't know what the plan is, though.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, where we're supposed to meet and, yeah, we're going up to Virginia City tomorrow and seeing Roseanne Cash. There's about 8 or 9 of us going up.
Oh, that'll be fun.
So we're gonna spend the night up there. It's like, I don't wanna be driving down that hill after. Make sure Lisa's aware, right? You know, I don't know if it's your same cell as it used to be. Let me let you know.
Hey, Rich, what time is the field trip over tomorrow?
Noon. Yeah, 9 to noon.
Okay.
Yeah, if you put that address in your map, it'll tell you where to go.
Now, I know the work ones.
It's at Ormat's front gate, basically. We're gonna meet there and drive it from there.
Okay. So the access. Yeah, I need to make sure I know how to get.
It's gotta be Montrose
Oh,
Highway.
I guess we read all the,
No, there's nothing on 395.
so we know how to get there?
But Mike and John
Front
Snow
gate.
know, because
All
I've
right.
not been there either.
1010, yeah. Somebody draw some map.
Well, you can park on the freeway and just,
You're not going? Gotta get some product out the door.
Yeah.
I have a meeting with a client.
A deadline. Rich, I have a cell number that, again, I
well, we
don't know
just
if
got
it's still
back from
current.
Stanford Cancer Center
934-3971.
last night, and we got a second opinion.
And I do have a,
775.
yeah,
934.
They did some additional tests.
3971.
and We'll decide in a couple more weeks
And I-
whether to
Yeah.
continue on.
And I have her personal email, too.
Catherine
And she's cancer-free at the moment,
@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Yep. got
which
that.
is really good. But her
See if we can
form of lymphoma,
be speakers
It's
at
called
Local Mining Expo.
double
She's back to work.
espresso non-Hodgkin.
Yeah, she started March 1st.
It's very narrow, and the likelihood of coming back.
So where do we go here?
So that's.
Oh,
But she's
good,
got
so
some
we just
very
go up by the
good-
mall
Get to
and turn down there.
It's an unknown.
Piece of cake.
Really.
I have to stop at the mall after, so it's perfect.
John's gonna tell us how to get there.
You go like you're gonna go to the Summit Mall, instead of turning in, it's roughly across the street or on the south side, and there's a regular little street sign that says Power Plant Drive.
Okay,
And then you'll look, there'll be a big gap, and then you'll see the fences and.
so it's off 395.
No, it's off Montrose.
Off off Mount Rose Highway.
Oh, it's not where the stoplight is.
No, no, you turn from Virginia Street, you'd turn onto the Mount Rose Highway, like you wanted the Tahoe, and instead of turning into the Summit Mall, you'll turn left or south onto the.
Oh, the Summit Mall, that's Rayleigh's.
No,
No, the summit, you know, the mall where Dillard's
Yeah,
and,
right.
yeah,
Rayleigh's is farther up.
yeah.
On Wedge Parkway.
I know where that's at. I'm confused.
It's pretty much.
Rich, I have the phone number for the convention center.
Little bit, no.
Is there a gate there, Richard?
You'll be able to turn the gates about an eighth of a mile in, and they'll probably have it open. I don't know.
775-738-4091.
Oh, you can't turn left into it from up, oh, okay.
Or you're just doing it, the highway is already above it.
It's on, yeah, if you look at that, it's on the,
Okay, why don't we reconvene?
I know, yeah. Yeah, because they're coming from Carson.
So we'll go to old business. Item A is open data site additions. Lucia?
Okay. Oh, I'll try not to use the pointer again. It's so tempting, it should work. Okay, so today I'm gonna give an update on the new stuff on the open data site. Unfortunately, 3 of you have already seen it, so no sleeping. So what is new? We've added the Nevada mining claims. All mining claims that are active and closed, we queried all of them. We think all of them. We have to check a couple. And also mining districts and commodities, and also all notices of intent and plans of operation that have ever been filed where the bond has been obligated. So here's the new look of the home page. The bottom part with the other sources of data, information and data looks the same. It's just this part right in here. So we've added the third button over, the Nevada claims, plans of operation, and notice of intent map. And then one over to the right is the Nevada claims, commodities, and occurrences map. So on this page, there is an enormous amount of data. So the mining claims, it's all mining claims that have ever been staked that are either active or closed. It's all the claim listings. So if it's in section 1 and in section 2, then it has 2 listings. This has resulted in a data set that has 1,955 points. That is too much to be navigating through in an interactive map. So they have been broken up by county. So when you're viewing this map and you don't see the claims coming on, it's because you have to go turn the claims in that particular county on. There's also the notices of intent and plans of operation. The big caveat again is that the bond had to have been obligated. Without that, you end up with a lot of extra stuff that may or may not be useful. It's kind of a lot to filter through, and at least with that, you know that some money went into the ground. There's also the historic mining districts that are shown for reference. The mining districts can be filtered by commodity, and we'll look at some of these functions here. So this is the map. This, I think I changed this. So this is what it looks like when you open it. You have the plans of operations and the notices of intent, and you have sections with plans of operation or notices of intent as of March of 2019. So the little black squares that are all over the map are the sections that have had plans of intent or notices of intent in them. The BLM looked over this and they suggested doing the symbology showing authorized, pending, canceled, or closed for both of those. So this is just with the notices of intent on. And we're gonna look at some of the pop-ups that are configured for, oh, first we can look at the filter switch. So up, I need a pointer. I really need a pointer. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you can start on the left, right under the NDOM logo. There's the symbology, the legend. The layers list is the next little button over that you can hardly see. The selection tool, the XYZ, and then there's the filter option. So if you click on that filter button, this is what's gonna come up. So in there, on the commodity filter, you can put, for example, copper. All of the available options that you can type in are in the list above. It's not case sensitive, but you can enter any of those commodities, and that's gonna show you the notices of intent that have the, the mineral of interest, I'm not remember, commodity of interest, commodity that they were looking for, as copper is gonna highlight, or that's the only thing that's gonna be turned on. If you go to the individual notice and you click on the point, the pop-up is gonna come up, much like the mining claims. It's gonna indicate what it is. It's a surface management notice that is partially or completely located in Township 31 North, Range 39 East, Section 16. The notice of intent has copper as the commodity of interest, and the case disposition is authorized. The bond was obligated on 2/5 of 2019, and the total case acres is, or was, in the case that it's expired or closed, 3.83 acres. It gives the customer name. If you wanted to search more on that individual notice of intent, you can click on the button in the square box, which will redirect you to the BLM case recordation serial register page report. And there are the parameters that you need. So you can also copy that value similar to the mining claims. We're gonna act like we clicked there and went to the next page. So select Nevada as the geostate and then enter the serial number and push apply. And the report for that notice of intent, so you can look further into the details of what happened on that notice of intent, will generate. Okay. The historic mining claims, when you click on it on that page, it's gonna come up just like the mining claims page, the active mining claims page. We are holding a workshop. If you guys, I think most of you probably saw the email go out, a workshop on how to use the open data site. Because when we met last time, I noticed that a lot of the questions were kind of on functionality. How do I do this? How do I view it like this? So the workshop, I'm gonna do the long presentation on the open data site, and then Rachel Mykander is gonna do a presentation on their open data site, and then the remainder of the time is gonna be spent with people asking, how do I? Basically, that's our vision for that workshop, just to get people who are unfamiliar with like the toggling the filter on and off, looking at stuff in the attribute table. You can adjust the transparency. If you don't like what I have on the map, you can, with pretty much kind of do whatever you want. Turn it on, turn it off, adjust the transparency, export the Excel tables. In the case of NBMG, you can export their shape files or KMZs. Ours, you download them. It's kind of the same, but a little bit different. Anyways, that workshop is pretty much full. There's like a couple more seats if anybody's, it's Tuesday from 8 to 12 at the Gold Building. So the claims and commodities, again, we're looking at the filter widget. You can enter, we enter copper here, and that's going to show all the mining districts where copper has been noted as the, either a commodity or something that was produced. Bentonite. There's a little one up in Humboldt County that I can see from here. You can enter any of those commodities, and that's going to come up. So basically, that is the big changes to the open data site. If you guys have any questions that I'm going to have to demo, I'm going to have to go over there.
I just want to comment, I think it's a great idea to go to give that workshop. I saw that notice go around through GSN too, and just, it's a good service to the users.
I hope so. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who can benefit. It's just kind of how do we take away the new, and I don't know how to do this factor. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a tool that I think is easy to use, and if we could just get people in there and help them, then I think we can get a lot more.
Lucia, I think last time I might have mentioned that the GSN at the regular meeting, maybe in September, that you guys could come and give us a demonstration
Yeah. Yep.
and update on INDOM, and then a demonstration of the website. Because you'd have over 100, you'd have 120 people there.
Yeah,
So-
Dana actually also invited me to present this at their mining convention in Tahoe.
In September.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good idea, yeah.
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Lucia, do you want to comment a little bit on where we're at in our project with the Bureau that was enabled at the last commission meeting when the commission said, okay, here are the two things we want to fund at the Bureau for the intervening year? Because the second of those was a database type project, and we have met with them several times and have a scope worked out.
Yeah, so right now, so we've met with them twice. We have a timeline, a project timeline of when things are estimated to be done. The estimated completion date is May of next year. Right now, we're sourcing the data, where all the data sets are going to come from, and assessing what kind of, if there might possibly be the need for an additional server. Because if there's an additional server, then it might cost maintenance. So they're just kind of assessing what data we're going to have within, I guess, certain parameters. How much space is it going to take up? What do they already have? What do we have? What can we get our hands on? And then I think next month we start formatting it, I believe, is on the timeline. So
And the name of the project is?
the Nevada Mineral Database, Nevada, I don't remember.
The Nevada Mineral Resource Database,
Database.
which the intent is to start gathering up, and some of the layers that Lucia's developed will be available in this. It will be housed by the Bureau, because this one's going to be a sizable one, and it will have former 43101's information that people who retire and turn in, are willing to put into it, that gets scanned and put in. And we're trying to build a framework to have that happen. As you always hear more and more about a big bunch of information on various different districts is found in a container box and 40 miles north of Reno, and it's destroyed, right? And we're trying, the Bureau is desirous, and that was the project as we scoped it out, was a place to put those things, much like you see and hear about in Alaska and some of the provinces in Canada, which actually can legally require that be turned in. Well, we can't legally require that it be turned in, but if they want to donate it on their way out, I shouldn't say that, right? As when they retire, but I have to think of the one that most recently I heard about, which is when I was approached with, well, a certain individual would like to, turn in all of the files from this company called Cordex so that the public can have access to them. but by the way, wants $100,000 for it. And you know, we're trying to enable that kind of thing to where, you know, we're not paying for the data, but there's some place for it to go, and it's not lost. So that as Mike Russell and John Muntean say, companies that come into Nevada don't have to rediscover the wheel when they pick up a project and go do the same thing the last company did. And comment on that, Bob?
These mics are tricky. It's an explorer's pet peeve, the reinvent the wheel thing. And we joke about there's this truck that drives around Nevada and data randomly falls off it. So there's a lot of people that get a lot of data without necessarily buying it from the former owner, because you know what happens is, you mentioned Cordex. There's probably hundreds of companies who've signed hundreds of CAs to look at hundreds of projects over the last 30 years, and that data usually is supposed to be returned if requested, but oftentimes the person doesn't request it. And so there's a lot of data out there, but having a repository would be amazing development in Nevada for just, you know, I mean, it's frustrating to continue to go out and go, I know these guys drill holes out here and we can't get the data. And it's a fatal flaw in advancing a project, because are we gonna go out and do the same thing and get the same result? And so I think that would be great. Were you saying that you would find money to buy data from sources like that, or is that a difficulty?
No, I don't
Right.
think, that's not what we envisioned. We were trying to set up something that was a framework so that when it was brought in, donated, or somebody found someplace and said, gee, I don't have room to store this anymore, that it would have a place to go at the Bureau and it could get scanned in and set up an electronic database, because eventually, you know, it's miles and miles of paper. So if we could get it to that point. No, I wasn't really envisioning that. We have, I think it was a $30,000 or $35,000 program, and that the commission said to look into for expenditure in the next fiscal year. And when we did the schedule, we actually put down that we would, the group, which is Lucia and Mike Russell and Dave Davis and Jennifer Malden and myself.
And Emily.
Right, the new geodatabase manager for the division. That's the team that we put together. And we would like to roll it out at the May 2020 GSN meeting. That was our final point of, okay, roll out. So I don't know if you have a speaker for that date, but it would be nice if you could hold it and we
I
could see.
don't know if there's going to be a meeting in May because that's a symposium.
Oh, next year, okay.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe it's the
April?
symposium that we roll it out at then, because we were trying to build it to where we had a date where we had to have this done. And we're going to continue to meet monthly in order to drive it.
And prior to that, there's some users, anticipated users in industry that we're going to pull in to kind of beta test this and see if there's any.
Well, the symposium would be a great spot to, you better get a hold of Eric Strusacker.
Okay, we'll do that.
He's in charge.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next item of old business is the PDAC recap. Rob?
Okay. Rich covered quite a bit of this already, and I think you guys have discussed this, but this last year, the division funded the booth for the Nevada booth at PDAC. 3 staff members, myself, Garrett, and Rich attended. I saw 2 commissioners there, and 25,000 other people walked around the halls. So what we're gonna talk about real quick is photos of the booth and location, the presentations that we did at the booth, the 2018-19 analytics comparison of the website, so I'll show that graphically, and then any questions. So in 2018, they were kind of in a long, elongated booth down near the bathrooms. 2019, we got a spot right next to one of the Canadian provinces in a 20 by 20 island booth, which I think came out very well, considering we were next to Canada, the European Union, Turkey, Colombia. I think we were well represented where we were. It was about 50% larger as well as the 2018 booth, and I think it did increase the amount of visitors at that booth. You can see in the photo there, when you walked in that hall, you could see the Nevada Stake Your Claim banner floating, and we got the free spinning effect by the air conditioning unit there, so that was a pretty nice effect we got. I think it came out really well. The North Hall, right? Yeah, the North Hall
Yeah,
was
North Hall.
a little bit quieter than the South Hall, but when you walked in, you're able to see everything, and we kind of stuck out pretty well with that. Some of the graphics design changes that we had, we created some new maps with help with the Bureau, and made this large banner right here. 11% of the U.S. non-fuel minerals produced in Nevada, 75% of the gold production, you know, the only lithium producer. Those key things kind of brought some people's attentions to the booth a little bit right there. And that exploration trends map really got people coming in, actually sitting there at our booth, pinpointing stuff is, trying to figure out where things are. I think it worked out really well. The Bureau updated a couple maps as well as the division did. Rachel Mykander updated the geologic map of Nevada. She just kind of added a little new color scheme to it to kind of give it a little brighter look. And then she combined a couple of the units so it was a little easier to read as well. And then we had the remote sensing data maps, just the regional ones, and then Mike and Lucia came up with the bottom one with the Nevada Explorer. So they took all the companies that did not have duplicates or merged their names and had multiple claims in Nevada and put them up there. So it was pretty cool for companies to walk by and be able to see their name on the side of the Nevada booth. This is what the 3D rendering of it was, and that's what it came out to be. It truly was exactly what they said. It came out really well of being able to have the GSN side, the exploration side, the presentation side, and then kind of the division bureau agency side for information. There's the screen that we're doing presentations on. There's Rich pointing to that exploration map. Might have needed a step stool for some of the stuff in northern Nevada, but it was able to be read. Just a couple more views of the booth.
Look at that old prospector there.
Yeah, the old prospector in the background. They're still around. And then presentations. So we did do multiple presentations there at the booth. Joel did the Nevada mining advantage and opportunities for oil tolling and copper concentrate. I did the Open Data website, but then I found out just going to the Open Data website, because we had internet access, and walking people through it was a very effective tool and really useful. A lot of people came up to us and were asking, what are claims in Nevada? How do I look at it? And you pull up that Open Data site and instantly you're able to show them. They're blown away that we had that now. Garrett did the MI report and Bob did the Renaissance Exploration Nevada report. So we had four presenters, a couple different presentations, about 10 to 15 minutes. We have about 4 to 8 people per presentation at best. It was decent. I think there's a few things we could redesign and have some better after-action review talks with the committee on that one. Bob had I think the largest presentation and the largest people coming towards it, so he got the win there. But that just shows you can see the European Union in the background. Behind that's Colombia. Right behind the people on their left is Turkey. On the right was the Canadian province. I think we're in a really good location with the correct people. Okay, so the web analytics. So you got the PDAC dates there, the NDOM website. You can see a boost, we think, during PDAC as well as right afterwards. The Open Data site is an obvious boost on the lower one. You can see a lot more people coming after PDAC and checking out our Open Data website shortly right after it. The Bureau of Mines site as well. Not too much of a boost, but there is a little bit. And then the Bureau's Open Data website did get a boost right afterwards as well. Some other notable takeaways. GSN signed up 5 new members, over $1,300 in publication sales, which was up significantly, and 15% uptick in their web volume in March. Mining Association had 4 new members and countless people coming to find Joe and talk to Joe Riney about how to come to Nevada and how to do business in Nevada with the Mining Association.
That's great.
And GoEd had great networking with several companies while I was there. Joel was a sought-after man at that conference. So overall, I think it was a very good year. People were happy to see Nevada there, and like what you guys have said, I think it's really important for us to be there. Questions?
I actually just want to make a comment, and just, I was there, and just, I thought that the booth was a really great representation for Nevada. I thought it did a really good job.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. We'll go to item C, the 2019 legislative session update. Rich, is that you?
It is, Mr. Chairman. I would just note that in your books, this was our primary brochure for that. I know those of you who were there saw it, but some of you haven't. And we did that last year, and it's a collaborative effort with Nevada Bureau of Mines and Geology and us to put that together sort of as our sales brochure of what's going on and the new discoveries in the state. Okay, I'll now go assume my spot here. Okay, a little update about the legislature. And in your book, there's just really one document here, actually two. I'll talk to both of them with some of my notes here about what's transpired during the 120-day session, of which, if you look at the 120-day calendar and mark down May 9th, we actually just have 25 days left remaining out of that. So it's really kind of moved along quickly here. There's actually not a lot of bills that have been signed. And I won't try to get into some of the ins and outs of that, but I do want to bring up several that may affect us. There was no legislation in this session that directly impacted the industries that we regulate or advocate for. There was three bills that had the word mining in them. Two of them were from constituents of a certain senator, and after he realized that they were trying to change federal law, those were pulled. And the other is one that we helped co-sponsor, and that was Senate Bill 53, which was to put a 30-day limit on comments from the Mining Oversight and Accountability Commission, or MOAC, which was formed in the 2011 legislature, but has not met since December of 2015. So it's more or less defunct, and it becomes a bureaucratic issue for both NDEP, us, and the other agencies, the Bureau of Mines and Geology, and taxation. That's where MOAC exists in their statutes. But the two that have to update and promulgate regulations are us and NDEP. And there's a step in there after the commission hears it and gives it a blessing and moves it forward, that MOAC has a chance to comment on it. But in the legislation, there's no limit to the amount of time that is. And of course, if it's not meeting and it doesn't exist, then, as our Deputy Attorney General has told me several times, you can't do what's impossible, therefore you don't have to adhere to it. But that's an uneasy feeling, you know, it's language that needs to be cleaned up. We tried to do that at the last legislative session and couldn't move it forward. This time around, we tried to put at least a 30-day limit. It passed out of Senate Natural Resources easily, but it's sitting. And I don't know what's going to happen to it if it gets a hearing in Assembly Natural
Rich,
Resources or not.
Why doesn't anybody care?
Well, Senate Natural Resources, the folks, when they heard it, said, why isn't this on the Sunset Committee list, which is where, in my opinion, it belongs. It's defunct. But, you know, this governor could decide, I'm going to appoint people, if he can get people to do that. I don't know what the next action is. So right now we exist and continue to move the way we have for the last several years and wait to see what happens if it's put on a Sunset Committee list. I can't do that. That has to be something that the legislature does. And that's a list of language that's in the statutes that a group goes through for the next session and says, all of these things need to be removed. All in favor say aye. And then you clean up some statutes that are old. And we hope that happens, but it hasn't yet. So SB 53 is an unknown at this point in time as to what the outcome of that is going to be. There are two bills that could have an impact, I believe, on us that I've been monitoring. One is AB 264, and that is a bill that relates to relations between state agencies and Indian nations or tribes. And it's one that got amended after its first language, but it's the one and only bill that I did a fiscal note on this year because it would require state agencies and boards and commissions to designate a Native American liaison within our organization to liaison and do consultation with them. And the bill has some language that would, in my opinion, cause a fair amount of potential time in there. And that bill passed out of the Assembly, and it's now sitting over at the Senate and hadn't had any activity in the last, I think, month or 6 weeks. So I don't know what the outcome of that one is, but even with the amendment, I did not remove the fiscal note on it because the language still is a little bit concerning to me about it being a mechanism to bypass regulatory mechanisms by having a separate appeal mechanism. And I'll just leave it at that. And then the final one is the one that I left that Brian grabbed, and that is AB, you had it right there, 486, which is the creation of the Division of Outdoor Recreation within the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, which also had an amendment to it. It was a bill put forward by a committee, and one that was obviously supported by an entity called the Outdoor Industry Outdoor Industry OIA Association, which actually brought forward testimony that said, and you may have seen this because there was a press release yesterday the Forest Service put out that says that the Outdoor Industry Association, essentially recreation, creates $12 billion in revenue and 87,000 jobs in the state of Nevada. And in drilling down on that, we found that to be not a factual statement. And from an entity that actually doesn't exist in Nevada, and there's no economic model to come up with, so it's vapor from what I could see. But it was quoted a couple of times, and I've been paying special attention to bring that up to people when it gets quoted. It was quoted in the Forest Service's announcement on the Rubies yesterday. So, and one of the documents that I've used to help educate on that is the second document that you have in here, which is the BLM Public Lands by the Dollars. And I like to freely distribute this, and if anybody needs it electronically, I'm happy to send it to you, because I think it tells a really, really strong story here, because their number for, outdoor recreation, which is great, and I mean, we all love to do that because it's a lot of the people in this industry that do it, is $505 million. That number doesn't include all SUV sales in Nevada like the $12 billion number does, by the way. So this actually tells a good story in Nevada about the impact of the BLM public lands, and I'm going to suggest to the Forest Service that perhaps they do something similar.
Did the BLM do this?
Yes, this is put out by the BLM. This is something every year that they put out to show the impacts, and I included it in the packet that was sent to all the legislators this year too, just so they could see those impact numbers there of what goes on in the BLM public lands. And then the second page there is the number of jobs and the breakdown of jobs that are there. But those are good documents to help educate, I think, people. So we have 25 days left of our legislature. And at least in the news this morning from via the Indy, the number that they've come up with is they're about $211 million over what they have revenues to do. So I think the next 25 days will probably be spent largely in figuring out what the priorities are, like they usually are there. There's been a lot less bills signed this time around than there have been in past years. There's actually very few bills signed by the governor at this point in time. I think the number that I heard about a week ago was there was 3 or 4 bills signed by our new governor, and at this point in the last session, I think the last governor had signed 60. So things should get very interesting here in the final 25 days, and I'm sure our legislators who are doing a great job will be very, very busy. But again, there's not anything that really, directly at this point affects us.
Has Brad taken a position on the new division?
It's not his bill. He has tried to assist, as Brad usually does, and as I do, with legislators who are writing, legislation and they ask for assistance. He's been trying to help with language to at least make it correct, because the original bill said that there was going to be 2 administrators, and one was going to deal with getting grants and actually dealing with outdoor recreation, and the other was going to be responsible for making decisions regarding natural resources in the state of Nevada. And that's what raised the red flag on this one. And the rewritten language still has that in there. So I think it's of concern. It just looks like, and I guess I don't want to comment any further probably on it, would be best.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And any questions I can try to, during the beginning of the session, I'll note, I did the usual thing that I do the first couple of weeks before the session starts. The legislators are very, very available. They start to show up. I spent time over there with the heads of natural resources and key players and in the various Senate and Assembly people who I've known from the past, and talked to them about, the various things that we had concerns about, SB 53. I spent a lot of time on the Navy issue with that because, as you can see, actually there is a Senate joint resolution that's been winding its way through that, doesn't mean that they can do anything with it, but it has forced the Navy to show up and testify in front of the legislature. And I think that they've hopefully had some humility to that, but I know that some of the impacts, I spent a lot of time with Dr. Titus, who's the assembly person that includes Fallon, and she's extremely interested in it and brought up the point in the hearing that the Navy did not analyze the governor's Nevada alternative, and that had some impact on the committee that was hearing it at the time, which is good. Mining day at the legislature was February 13th, I think it was, right? That was really good. That was the Nevada Mining Associations. And then the second, we've had actually 3 days where we've been over there. The second was the university's cooperative, agency day, where they had the Bureau of Mines and Geology and the Ag Co-op and so forth there. Those groups had a day at the front there. And then on April 24th, just a couple weeks ago, was Mineral Exploration Day. So some of us from the division, we rotated in and out to help them with those days. So 3 days is quite a bit, actually. I think that's the most. And it's good to be there when they see, the industry folks there and all. They usually have questions, and nothing bad has happened yet, so that's good.
Rich, the apparent inaction of the slower action of the legislature this year, is it possibly because of the number of new legislators, or what's the feeling?
You know, my feeling, because this is my third session, is it's twofold. You know, you usually have about a third of the legislators that are new, but you also have a new governor's office. You know, and if you think about when a new governor comes in the state of Nevada, they largely inherit the budget from the last governor, because it takes 6 months to do a state budget. There's a lot of iterations in that of going through reviews and so forth, and then that's handed off by the last governor, you know, in the first week of January to the incoming governor, who then has, you know, a month to make any tweaks before it goes to the legislature. So I think that's a normal thing. I've not been through it before, but my guess is every governor that's coming in has gone through that, and they have new people in the governor's office, all new. So, you know, I think that's probably some of it. You know, it's a great group over there. I report to Scott Gillis, who used to work in the city of Reno, and he's been very good, you know, engaged, and, you know, it's the monthly meeting, and the governor's office calls when they want, you know, some interpretation of something. So that's gone bumplessly compared to the last. But it did take a little bit of, hey, you know, we're here. This is what we do. You know, let us know what you want the commission to do, and here's what we do. And you have to educate the new incoming governor's folks too on these things. So that's been my last 90 days. Except for PDAC. Okay, any other questions? I mean, if you'd like to come down, come on down if you haven't been there already. Although I'll say this, you're probably not going to get much access to legislators for the next 25 days, because they're going to be locked up and sequestered and working weekends. Ways and Means already announced that they'll be working weekends for the rest of the
They
session.
got measles?
You know, just a lot to do in 120 days, so. It's going well. Okay,
Thank you, Rich.
thanks.
We'll go to our last item under old business. That's the division financials and recommendations. Mike? Batting cleanup?
Mike Vischer for the record. So at the last commission meeting, we were asked to kind of come back with a recommendation, analysis and recommendation on the reserve guidance with regards to our current budget, since it's been a while since we looked at that. So the first slide is an expenditure analysis from 2009 to 2018, and then the next 3 years for the forecast. And I broke it down into two categories: non-discretionary, which is basically all of our operating and obligated monies. That includes the special projects, like the funding to the Bureau for their projects, because it really is kind of already obligated monies. And to a point, some of Category 39, our contracted is obligated, but it is largely discretionary. We can choose to do it. We may have a contract with the contractor. It doesn't mean we obligate monies to that. But there may be projects where we've committed to doing some work. We'd probably have to see that through, depending on the timing, the year, the actual closure project, that kind of thing. But I broke it out as to non-discretionary, discretionary. So you can see those two different categories. The average 6-month operating for 10 years, and then the 6 months going forward, and that includes this current fiscal. Because FY19 through FY21 is noted in the current budget and in the GovRec biennial budget that is going to have its final close tomorrow, best reflects future forecast expenditures. The agency is recommending using $1.2 million as the new reserve guidance amount. Reductions to Category 39 could then act as a safety net as need be if there's any unforeseen revenue decreases. I I guess that could be an action item in and of itself, if they want to adopt that as the new reserve guidance. This subject and the revenue forecast with any impacts to mining claim reductions or the fee reduction is part of the potential or possible action on this one. So we can continue on with this, or if you
Why
want to
don't you keep going, and then
Okay.
we'll look at doing motions
Okay.
and votes at the end.
Next slide is one that you've seen before. What I'm trying to do here is forecast where we're going to end out for this fiscal year with our money from mining claim revenue. And what I'm forecasting is that we're going to come in at the end of the year with mining claim revenue, $2,050,000 roughly. It's going to be a year-over-year increase of just about 1%. You know, you can look at this and see that why we have to have the reserve in place, because we don't get the majority of our revenues until the latter part of the year, or because the certain counties remit the revenue on a quarterly basis. We really don't receive that money until January or February, and then our revenue largely drops off, except for geothermal revenue, which doesn't start until February. So here's the standard picture for the money coming in. It represents anywhere between 75 and 85% of the total revenue to the agency, depending on any given year. And the next slide, I just wanted to talk a little bit about those claim filings, because there's a difference between the number of mining claims and the number of claim filings. When an entity stakes a new claim, they may choose to record their notice of location. They then record their certificate of location within 90 days. That's effectively double dipping on the same claim. If there is an amended certificate of location, that also adds to that claim being filed on again. If there's any change to those certificates, they may add, may correct it. If the BLM finds that there's a curable defect, they'll correct that with the BLM. They'll also correct that at the county. What this does is it increases the number of mining claim filings at the county relative to the number of mining claims recorded at the BLM. We will always have more filings than the number of claims. I'm going to skip forward, or that's actually highlighted here on this one. Historically, that's about 10.5%. So I just wanted to note that. And then also, the bottom graph shows the total claim filings at the county from 2010 to 19. You can see the ebb and the flow, and you can see the number of filings. And if you just put an average of those, you're going to have a flat line. But we do ride a bit of a roller coaster. I want you to take note of the number of consecutive decreases or increases, and that's going to come into play in the forecasting. So you can see at most we had 4 years of decreases, and that was from 2012 to 15. But that was the maximum amount. But it was significant. So we went from about 225,000 to about 188,000. So the next slide, financials and AML expenses. I throw this in here just because what we're looking at is impacts to some of the key programs. And as Rob discussed on Category 39, what we're talking about here is our discretionary expenses and whether we want to increase the expenditures on AML or whether we want to do a claim fee decrease or a combination of the two. And on this one, we've got at the bottom in the orange, you can see the hard line is the total AML. Excuse me. The percent of AML of total expenditures is the orange dash line, and that percent is on the right-hand side. Our revenue steadily increased. Our expenditures have tried to mimic that, and we've certainly taken large bites at AML, which we can do in a targeted fashion, although we do get some of these that are unanticipated, like the Clark County for Arden on the right-hand side and Gold Butte. Those were things that were not quite anticipated nor forecast in the budgets. Our reserve amount is in the blue line, and you can see it was quite high in 2008. We started taking targeted bites at it using some AML, and then it dropped off, as did our mining claim revenue. And then it's built back up again because our mining claim revenues increased again. Next slide, you've seen this one before as well. What I'm trying to do is forecast out through FY21. And this is the base forecast. It does include the additional monies to the Bureau for that second project, as well as the $50,000 to the Las Vegas Natural History Museum. It also includes, or the assumptions also include, that we are going to have some continued amount of funding from our federal partners to the tune of roughly $100,000 a year through FY21. And then most importantly, I want you to look at Category 39. We have a work program in place to increase our authority to spend money based on what the commission had asked for. That does not get heard until June 20th, and that's for expenditures in this fiscal. We have projects underway right now that we're moving forward, and hopefully we'll get some of this stuff done. But we have looking to increase the authority for Category 39 to almost $650,000 in this fiscal. But our budget that's in front of the legislature right now, the base is $500,000 in FY20 and 21. That was in the governor recommended. It's expected to be approved. The budget closes tomorrow, but that's part of this base forecast. And then the very bottom line in red is the excess over the $1.2 million guidance amount. So we would close FY21 with $661,000 over the 1.2 guidance amount. And so this is really what forces the decision to, what do we do about it, right? So the next slide is looking at a sensitivity analysis based on a couple of assumptions. The dark black line is the base forecast. There's no change. There's no change to mining claim revenue. This assumes that we have the same amount of mining claim revenue all the way through FY24, that we have $100,000 a year from our Fed partners, that we spend $500,000 a year on AML, contracted AML. The red line is the 1.2 guidance. And then I threw in some options to look at for consideration. And one of them was, what if we increase AML expenditures by $150,000 a year for 4 years? And that's the red dotted line. And you'll see it comes in at the end of FY24 just above the guidance amount. Then I looked at the claim fee reductions. If we reduce the claim fee by 50 cents per claim, that's the solid green line, or the dash green line, sorry. And you'll see that that one comes in because if we do a claim fee reduction, it won't actually take effect until FY21. We can't do anything until FY20. We couldn't actually get the recorders to change what they're collecting until FY '21. So there's a bit of a delay. You see the dashed green line stays flat before it starts to do anything. And it would exit FY 2024, and the reserve amount would be 1.5 million. Alternatively, if we did a dollar decrease, that's the solid dash blue line, we come in at just a little bit above $1 million, but that's below our reserve guidance. So if we do a combination, if we do 50-cent reduction on the mining claim fee, and we add $75,000 to AML for 4 years, we come in just barely underneath our guidance, and that's the green dot dash line. And then for comparisons, I added that also to the $1 reduction. That brings us in about $900,000, and that's well below our reserve guidance. So this was for flat mining claim listings. So what if there's a 3% year-over-year decrease? And this is the final slide. And you can see the impacts to what that does. This is 3% year-over-year for 5 years. Okay. Which we haven't seen in the last 10 years, right? So this is probably a worst-case scenario, but I want to present it because we have seen one-year reductions of 10% before. So somewhere between these two is probably the likelihood. But if you look at the long term, we've been relatively flat. We're probably lucky because of the increased interest in lithium. Doesn't mean that there's going to be the increased interest in cobalt or zinc, right? Or moly. Copper is seeing an increase again. So all of these come into play, but I wanted to wanted you to see these two comparisons, and in large part that perhaps a combination of nominal fee reduction of 50 cents and increased AML expenditures of $75,000 a year, or $150,000 or $75,000 a year for either 4 or 5 years, gets us pretty darn close to our reserve guidance, with the caveat that the biggest way to adjust the trajectory of that decline, the slope of it, is taking the bites at AML, all else being considered. The other thing that this does, if you remember from Rob's discussion, was our capacity for the program right now is about $650,000, roughly. We're budgeted at $500,000. So we have capacity for another $150,000. But if a partner comes in and says, we've got $150,000 we'll give you to take care of the next Arden or whatever, we can't do that if we're already at our limit of $650,000. So one of the things that a combination does is build in capacity for additional partner funding, or the flexibility for us to reevaluate our spending on a year-by-year basis based on mining claim revenue, at the same time as providing a mining claim fee reduction that starts to drop our reserve no matter what. And so our recommendation is that we do a 50-cent claim fee reduction, and then we augment the AML program with additional monies based on additional guidance, revenue, future forecasts, but that we're looking at something at $75,000 increase, which adds to AML a little bit, but still allows for additional projects that might come in that we can't foresee. And these things could be the BLM finds money because there's additional capacity on that grant, but we just don't know what funding is going to be like in any one year. And that affords us the flexibility to kind of get a soft landing on our slope as we move forward. And we're not looking at near-term impacts. We're looking at 5 years out. So, I think it's a reasonable thing to consider. We have heard from some claimants that, yeah, they'd be up for a 50-cent claim fee reduction. hardly ever happens, right? When has it happened last? The BLM will be increasing their maintenance fee this fiscal year, this coming fiscal year, and it'll be in the Federal Register. It's supposed to be there before July 1. But they do not know what that amount is going to be. But it will go up from $155 to something, most likely.
As I recall, last time, they do it every 5 years. And last time it was a cost of living raise. And it went from like 130 to 155, something like
It
that.
went from 140 to
140?
155. Before that, it was 125.
So,
So it was $15 increase each time, the last two
oh,
times.
okay. Wow. It's, yeah. Or 50 cents is nothing.
It's a matter of perspective, I think.
Any discussion from the commission?
Yeah, I got a question on these graphs. I'm not certain I know which one is which here. On the last, the green, the one that intersects the 120 or 1.2 million at 2024. Which one is that? Is that the 50% or 50-cent reduction and 75 increase?
So on the 3% year over year graph, is
Yes.
that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay, so that one is a 50-cent claim fee reduction, gets us right to 1.2 million. But coincidentally, so does a 75% increase to AML for 5 years. They both intersect at 1.2 million in 5 years.
Okay.
So what I'm looking at is really, even from a conservative outlook, realistically, we're probably looking at something between these two, between flat mining claims and 3% year over year, looking out all the way to 2024. If it goes up, great, but that only compounds the issue.
So, Mike, I actually thought I heard earlier from Rob that he was at max capacity right now.
At $650,000.
Okay. Okay.
Mike, do you have any thoughts, or did you review the 1.2? Is that a good number given overhead and salary?
Yeah, if anything, I think it may be a little high. But we kept that in there because of the fact that even with our contracted work, our AML work, one of the biggest seasons of the year that we do the work is the fall. For the backfills, that's the one time of the year, if there is potential for bad habitat, that you have the opportunity to exclude them and fill it in. The rest of the seasons, they could be hibernating in there, they could be using it for roosting, maternity colonies, where they're not coming and going every night. And so the fall season is kind of the big push for backfills or foam closures. Bat gates, it's dependent on how it's used. But because of that, right now, we're gonna be queuing things up in the fall of this year, which will be FY20. We're queuing things up, and we're gonna have stuff moving already towards those. So we're gonna be incurring obligations on the fly, starting pretty early in this next fiscal, that would be hard to stop. And so some of those Category 39 expenditures are not really discretionary. They are, but not completely. So we kept it in there because, this is really what our program is trying to do. But if anything, it may be just a tad high. And that's why I also feel like the combination of the two, it gets us pretty close to our target zone. And it still gives us the flexibility that we don't have to change the claim fee, again, realistically in a short term, unless claims go up significantly. And it still gives us the flexibility to take additional AML bites. And doesn't maximize us that we know for the next 5 years, we're at max capacity on AML, and there's no room for anything else to come in the door. So it's kind of a blend of everything. You know, it's still a forecast.
I guess I've got one comment, and I mean, I see the logic of wanting to, as I'll phrase it this way, of moving forward down the path of doing a reg change to decrease the fee. My one concern is, given what Rich said about the discrepancy between revenue and expenses in the current state budget, I'm concerned there might be or there's certainly a potential for a sweep this year. And so some of this excess we have might disappear. And so I would not want to say, I would not want to vote at this meeting saying we're definitely doing a decrease. I can see starting to move forward with it so that we're ready on July 1, after the session's over, to move forward with it, but we'll have an opportunity to see what the legislature does with any potential excesses we have.
Excellent point.
That's a good point.
So if I could comment on that, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
And I had two comments, because I always concern myself with that term sweep too. But the one time that money was swept from the Division of Minerals, you know, prior to I forgot the year, but it was 2008 or 9 or something like that. What was swept was a calculation of all of the interest that had accrued in the treasurer's office that was paid to the division over those years, not principal. I don't think legally that could be done because it's in the statutes, without somebody changing the statutes, that the statutes say this is what this money will be used for. You know, that said, I know there's other places in the state where they have swept money, but they've never done anything other than interest with us, and I think that was $400,000. We're pretty small potatoes in the world of sweeping. And
Just trying to be cautious.
but I agree with that. The mechanism by which, you know, if the commission decided to move forward with this, I would recommend, and I'll give you the chronology of how it happens, is if you voted today to accept the new reserve number, and by the way, you know, one of the reasons that's one of those arguments that we've been able to make with the governor's finance office, because under the state administrative manual guidelines for finances, a state agency is not supposed to hold more than 2 months of operating revenue. We hold 6 months. And the reason we've argued that is because we go 6 months without getting any revenue, and we have to adapt to that. And our commission has told us that this is what it should be, and that has prevailed as an argument. So like Mike said, that would help if that was part of the motion. The mechanism would be to direct the division to start moving forward with a regulation change in NRS 517.185 from $6 to $5.50 per filing. So that's the 50 cents, because the other $4 is in 513, and that is specific to abandoned mine lands. And we would then, quite, you know, be really simple when you just change a number. But the sequence is that as of July 1st, we will be able to submit to the Legislative Council Bureau changes. And once that window is open back up again, because it's closed for now, it's closed for a year and then open for a year, then they review it, and you know they take some time in doing that to determine the legality and so forth of it. We're trying to tee up the geothermal regulation changes, which, by the way, there's a draft of those out that we'll be going to workshop on here fairly shortly. But our goal is to be able to, in early July, submit them. And then the process starts. And after the submission, we wait 30 days, which is usually more like 60 days. And coming out of a legislative session probably will be more like 60 days. And then it has to go to workshop. It has to have a small business impact statement put to it. And then ultimately, once all of that is done, it would go to the commission for a vote. So even if you enable this right now and say, go ahead and start the process, you can vote no, when it comes to you and say, no, I don't want to do that. So you have an out, or what we're really looking to is, does this sound logical? And if so, let us start the process of doing it, because there's 6 months of process before you're probably going to see this back at you. And at that point, as Mike said, the effective date of this would be July 1st, 2020, because it's not going to be done in time to change claim fees this year. And that at least gives us an argument to say, if somebody says, you're carrying, you guys, your claims went up another 3%, you've got too much in your reserve. I've got it in my pocket to say, okay, Governor's Finance Office, we realize that, and the commission told us to do a claim fee decrease, and we're in the process of doing that now. If that makes sense. You're giving me some freedom to say we're dealing with that.
Dealing with it, yeah. Any additional comments?
Yeah, can I, the 75,000 at AML, I think I brought this up before. Could we spend 75,000 elsewhere?
If it's legally enabled in the statutes that we can do it. And then, the question is, okay, then what have we put in the budget? And if we're going to vary from that, then what mechanism do we do that? How do we go about that, doing that? Because if it's outside the budget and it's $75,000, I can guarantee it's going to go to IFC. And if it's a contractual thing with any entity, it's going to go before the Board of Examiners too.
Mike Fisher for the record. I just want to remind you also that Rob's presentation with regards to the forecast for what he's got queued up. He's got queued up the stuff that you asked him to spend additional monies in FY19 for, but he's got a similar amount in FY20 and even a larger amount in FY21. So everything's on track to spend more than the $500,000 that's in our current budget. Things can slide to a degree, and certainly as something else comes in the door, it'd have to slide down. But we'd like to see the kind of front-loaded efforts be funded as a priority over other things at this point.
When we did go through this process with Arden from the last budget and last year, because we had to go to the Board of Examiners, we have no problem with them if we're doing abandoned mine land work. They love it. If you recall with Arden, we reached out and Clark County agreed to fund $150,000 of that. That had to go to their county commission, and it was signed by now Governor Sisolak. And the person asked for it was the current chairperson, Marilyn Kirkpatrick. So, those, I think as far as abandoned mine land work goes, if we want to spend more money, we're not going to have any problem doing that. If we want to spend a little bit more money with the Bureau like we're doing, we have a contract in place with them. It is budgeted, and it is economic development type stuff. I don't think we would have a problem with that. I think if it was a donation to somebody, we would probably have a problem.
No, I was more referring to some other deliverables that would benefit the mining industry, the exploration industry, something like that.
Bureau-related stuff like we are doing? Because, I think those are really the biggest impacts. We're, for $35,000 at your last meeting, you directed us, and we're starting down what Lucia and I talked about there, which I think will be a great thing. And these publications that we've been doing, let's face it, no Bureau people here, for not a lot of money, we're driving the agenda at the Bureau. on the economic geology side.
You said 30,000, was it 30 or 35,000 we agreed to for?
Additional over the 85.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, why can't we split that 75 and double the 35?
Just my opinion, I think we could. The key is, what are the projects? Are they funded, are they projects that we
That
find
project
useful?
that you described of collecting all of that data, I don't think 35,000 is going to be enough. But
If it isn't, I'll let you know, because we put a budget to it last time, and I mean, these are people that are already employed by them. Remember, the Bureau has a statutory, statutes similar to ours that says they're supposed to do things for economic geology and so forth. You know, we can kind of control the. I don't want to say control it, but we can make the suggestions, and with a small amount of money can put the priority to it, right? And if you throw Lucia and I into the mix, then and we meet every month, it's going to happen. It's not. We're not gonna. It's not a. And they understand this. They've heard it. We're not just sending money over to pay for this person's salary or that person's salary. This is for a product, and I think that strategy that the commission has worked extremely well. You know, that it's not about paying salaries, it's about a product out the door. We don't care how you use the money.
Just one note on that project, it's funded for $40,000.
What about a dollar reduction? Just a round number.
a dollar reduction? Rich, if we were to lower it a dollar, and 5 years from now, we needed that money back, what would the process be complicated?
It would be the same process as this. You'd just go through rulemaking, just like when we raised it several years ago, $1.50.
But I mean, right now, we're at the maximum we can do without,
Right? You saying if we lowered it a dollar and then
lowered it a dollar and then needed that
dollar back,
dollar back in 5
You have
years?
to go through the same regulatory
same
process.
regulatory, because you're still below the cap.
Mike, would you just speak to the reason you selected 50 cents versus a dollar?
Mike Fisher for the record. So I chose both, and you can see both lines on here, and that was really just to see what the impacts are. But with the $1 fee reduction, if mining claims stay stagnant, we fall underneath our reserve guidance at 2024. So that seemed to be a little much. If we increase additional expenditures in addition to that, we fall well below. So that forced me to look at the 50 cents. Because originally it was, well, let's look at dropping it a dollar, and that's what I did. But it came in much lower, and the trajectory is a little steeper. So we're trying to look for something that manages a softer landing closer to that reserve and keeps it more manageable. It may be a combination in order to achieve that.
I'll make one motion.
Thank you.
Mike, both dollar reduction proposals include 75K increase to AML. Did you look at any intermediate cases with a dollar reduction and maybe only a 50K increase to AML, or just to try to play with the numbers a little bit and see how you come out relative to the guidance?
So, Mike Fisher again for the record. So I did two things on the dollar. I did just a dollar with no increase to AML, and that's just the dashed line. And then a dollar reduction with 75 increase to AML for 2 years. Part of the reasoning by adding some reduction on AML, we can make that impact FY20 right away. And so I start to drop our reserve base immediately. If I just wait and do it later, then we don't have that immediate impact. What we're trying to do is lessen the reserve amount soon, so it's not so high. but try to make sure that the slope of that line is not so steep we crash through and we're gonna have to make major changes again. I was trying to just kind of get us to land somewhere near there, 5 years out. Understand that we're limited in when we can do the rulemaking. It's only every other year we can do the rulemaking, and the county recorders have to reset their software for that, and we do have claimants that start paying in July. So for mining claim reductions, as long as we educate people, everybody's gonna wait until that takes effect. But for increases, as happened before when we did an increase, as you'll recall, people prepaid. You can pay as early as January on your claims for the next assessment year. So if you're gonna do an increase, people will get in front of that increase like they did, and you limit the effectiveness of that increase. And that's what happened when we did the last increase. People get wise to this if they have a significant number of claims. So we can't make big changes to the mining claim fee revenue. One, because of the delay in the rulemaking. Two, in the timing of when that actually occurs at the county level for filings. So, you know, I looked at the combination because we were trying to get our revenue down, our reserve down. But I played with the number of years added to AML in order to not get us too far away from that reserve guidance. And if you look at the 3% reduction year over year, I only added $75,000 a year to the very first year. That was it. The rest of that is affected purely by the reduction on the mining claim fee.
Mike, could we, the dollar reduction sounds better than a 50-cent reduction. So if you had a dollar reduction plus the 75K increase in AML, in 2 years' time, in 2022, if there's some changes, we could eliminate that 75 increase in AML. Is that correct?
You could.
And
That's-
that would
that's the-
change the curve.
It will change it a little bit, yeah. So you could add the difference and add it to the end on the right-hand side. And it would bring it back up. You'd still be a little underneath your reserve guidance. But that's kind of the beauty of doing a combination of the two. Whether it's 50 cents or $1 on the AML, that's your other bite, kind of how you're going to use your thrusters to get a soft landing.
But I mean, the AML portion of that could be easily adjusted.
We would still have to, if we're going to add money, just like for this next year, if we're going to increase expenditures in AML over the 500,000, we have to go and do a work program. So it's not just go spend more money. We have to get approval to spend more money from the legislature.
But I mean,
Right.
if we wanted to take that money away in 2 years, we wouldn't have to do anything,
Correct.
would we?
You wouldn't have to do anything because you were budgeted at X, you're going to spend less, you decide not to spend. So yeah, that would be an easy thing to do.
For me, though, the $1 increase under both scenarios, the flat line for claim filings and the year-over-year 3% reduction, both times the $1 decrease takes us below the reserve, which means we're guaranteeing another reg change in 4 years.
Or sooner.
Or less, because you have to tee it up.
Right.
Yes.
Mhm. But 4 years from now, we'd be teeing it up for maybe even,
Maybe 3 years from now, you'd be teeing it up
Teeing it up,
for
yeah.
effect in the fourth year to
Yep.
save you from the fifth year.
Yep.
Yes.
Mike, on those BLM increases of 15, do you see in the past, is there a little dip in claims when they raised it, the 15 and 15 or whatever?
The question from Commissioner Snow was, did we see a decrease when the BLM raised their maintenance fee? There was a nominal decrease, but not to the degree that you see when the gold price drops. That has a larger impact. So I think it'll be dependent on what the amount is. You know, the effectiveness is you then cut back to your core position if you just don't have money set aside for increased holding costs. There will certainly be some entities out there that didn't see this coming. But trying to predict exactly what that's going to look like, I really don't know. And not knowing what that increase is going to be, I really don't know. The BLM couldn't comment on what they thought that might be yesterday when I met with them.
Any additional discussion?
So what's staff recommending?
Staff's recommending a $1.2 million reserve base
And
and a 50-cent reduction
in 75.
and $75,000 a year in additional AML expenditures. But I don't think we need to make a recommendation on the 75 right now. I think what we're trying to tee up right now is starting the process to a reg change for the 50 cents. Or $1, depending on what the mood of the group is, but, so.
And first, we need to make the recommendation to put the new guidance in at 1.2 million.
Correct.
So I would recommend doing those
Those are, yeah,
separately, so they're
I agree, two
different
separate
action items.
motions, yes.
Oh, we didn't do that before?
No, we haven't done that, no.
So if you want a motion to make the new guidance number 1.2 million, I will so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion on the new reserve balance? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So, does someone want to try and articulate the next motion?
I'll give it another try.
Okay.
I would make a motion that we instruct staff to start the momentum or the process to decrease the claim fee by 50 cents. Separate from just keeping that one separate.
Yep. Mhm. We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion?
Do you perhaps need the date of 7/1/2020 effective, or no?
I don't think we do. I mean,
Okay.
it just 7/1 just happens to be the earliest we could possibly get something to LCB. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate the lively discussion. I'm going to choose to do public comment next. Is there anyone from the public that would like to say anything?
Uh-oh.
I do. It's good to see you, Tim.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Crowley. I'm the Vice President. Thank you. Vice President of Government Affairs and Community Relations for Lithium Nevada, which is developing the Thacker Pass project. I think we're working so hard at Lithium Nevada that we assume everybody knows we're working really, really hard, and this thing is really moving. We're moving fast. And then you run into people such as yourself, you say, well, what the heck's going on? So what I wanted to do is just take a couple minutes and invite you to meet with us as individuals or in groups that don't mess with your quorum rules, or if you'd like to be agendized on a future meeting and come and give you a nuts and bolts briefing on what we're doing. In addition to that, I'd love to invite you to come and visit a pilot plant that we built about a mile south of here near Renown Hospital to test out our process and get the design completed. But if you don't mind, I'd like to just take a couple minutes today and just give you a brief update. I printed out a two-pager that just gives you a little bit of the details on our project, but We, as you know, and Dennis certainly knows really well, we merged with Western Lithium in 2015, and since then, we've been really, we've taken a different approach to where Western Lithium is going. What we did was we invested about $75 million looking at the mine claim block, and which is just really robust in lithium. He indeed knows that. But it stretches all the way from Highway 293, even south of 293, north into the Oregon border. And it's a very unique lithium deposit. It's in a clay sedimentary host ore. It's shallow. At some points, we'll hit lithium at about 30 feet, and it goes no deeper than 400 feet. And what we did is we took we pivoted a little bit from what the focus was. And at that time, there was a focus on building this mine in a very attractive, from a lithium standpoint, area of the Montana mountains. But that comes with a lot of complications, biological diversity problems, including headwaters to some trout fisheries and sage grouse issues. And what we did was we went into the lower land, a place called Thacker Pass, and we explored there in great detail. And what we found was a deposit that's going to take us at least 46 years into the future. It comes with some added benefits of being on the highway, being near fiber, being near a power line, and it's a great find. We've changed the process to, at one point, there was look at a calcining process, and we've changed to a sulfuric acid leaching, vat leaching, inside of the plant leaching process. That's why we have a pilot plant that's just down the street. The leaching process is based on the phosphate industry. Sorry, I'm getting into the weeds a little bit. And we stole a lot of the technologies, but a couple are new. In fact, the leaching itself is new to the lithium space. So we're testing it in small batches here in Reno. We'd love to show it to you if you're interested. And we're moving quickly. The design is almost done. We've finished our baseline studies. We've submitted a conceptual plan of operations to the BLM late last year. We're going to submit our final plan of operations this summer, and we're on schedule to trigger the notice of intent in December this year. With the new executive order requiring a year to get through the EISs, we'll be done with and have a ROD. Don't laugh, Nigel. We'll be done.
We're on our seventh year, Tim.
We're going to get this. We'll be done December 2020, and it'll take a couple years to build the plant, and we'll be rocking and rolling. We have a couple of big challenges that we're working on. One is workforce development. You're all working on that. We're a little bit more akin to Cyanco than we are to Twin Creeks. We have a mining operation, but the mining piece is going to be relatively easy. We're in soft material. We're close to the surface. We're going to run, one of the ways we might mine is by running a continuous miner 24/7, one piece of equipment that will convey our material into roadworthy tractor trailers. So no haul packs, no 100-ton shovels. That piece is going to be easy. Where our workforce is going to be needed is in the plant itself. And so if we were going to poach employees off of another company, it would be Cyanco. But they know that. We've sat down with them. Our CEO has sat down with their CEO, and we've said, look, they're building a new plant right now as well. Let's address this problem together. And so we're working with the university system. We're working with the Great Basin College. I should have said that in the reverse. We're working with Great Basin College. We're working with the university system secondarily to get people trained so that when we're ready to go in 3 years from now, we've got a workforce that can run this thing, run our plant. The McDermott tribe is nearby, so we're spending a lot of time. We'd love to have as many of the tribe members come and work with us. Our expectations are realistic, but that's a goal of ours. Timing, of course, is a big challenge, the permitting timing. We're optimistic. We're going to testify. The COO of our parent company is going to testify in front of Congress on the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee on Tuesday. They're looking at Senator Murkowski's critical minerals bill, and we are the only potential development company on that panel. So that's an honor for us. But it's about, her bill is about permit timing. So I just thought I'd point that out to you. We're doing a lot of outreach, more in-depth conversations about our project than we're having right here. I apologize, it's just really formal. I know you've had a long meeting and need to go, but we're at your service to give you the full briefing whenever you'd like it. But we've spent a ton of time out in Winnemucca, talking to the various groups out there, Orvada, McDermott, Kings River, and onward. That's the way we're going to be successful, is by being upfront and open and transparent about what we're doing. So with that, please come, let me know if you'd like more information. I'm at your service.
Tim, just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
Western Lithium never was going to have anything up on top of the Montanas. We were always going to be next to the highway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was always the plan, just for those reasons. It's, that habitat up there is.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah,
People don't think that, and so maybe you've been thrown under the bus a little bit, and I will work to correct that. But that's the fear. The one issue that we've really worked hard to correct is that the sportsmen were saying, no, this isn't ever going to happen because of the sage-grouse, the sensitive sage-grouse habitats on top of the Montanas, and the belief was that that's where the mine was going. And but we're past that, I think. I don't want to be too naive about that, but.
Tim, I have a question. Is the process plant going to be built up in Thacker Pass, or are you going to put it down in the valley?
At Thacker Pass, yep. Yeah. The other thing that I think is really interesting about all of this is there's a lot of perception that you mine lithium and then you send it to Tesla, and that's the supply chain, and that we're co-located for that very purpose. But the supply chain is global, and there's few people. 7% of chemicals are produced in the lithium chemicals are produced in the United States. We're going to take it up to 25%. But the chemicals then go on to, concentrates go to China. China usually makes most of the chemicals. China sends it to Korea or Japan. They make cathodes. Cathodes come back and are sent to wherever the battery manufacturer is. And the actual production of lithium, the minerals, we only make 1% in the U.S. here in Nevada, and they come from Australia and Chile, mostly Argentina as well. So we're gonna change that. We and others. I heard it mentioned earlier. Mike Russell mentioned the exploration of lithium. Thank you.
But when's Argentina coming on board?
Before Thacker Pass. So what Dennis is mentioning is that Lithium Americas, our parent company, also has a development in Argentina at Cochari, and it will be it's going to beat us by about a year. So they're in construction right now.
And that's a brine. That's not a clay. That's a brine deposit.
That's right.
Yeah.
Tim, is there a source of sulfur in Nevada at all? I mean, you're going to have copious amounts of sulfur, right?
Yeah, technically there is. There's a town called Sulphur, not far from us. You ever been there? In the Black Rock Desert or near the Black Rock Desert. But we're going to import molten sulfur. You can get it readily available from other sources that are cheaper and easier than actually trying to start up a sulfur mine. We're building a sulfuric acid plant at Thacker Pass, and an alternative to doing that is actually importing sulfuric acid. But safety concerns that come with that, the weight, the transportation costs that come with that, just the expense and exposure is tremendous. So to bring molten sulfur to the mine and produce the acid that we need right there is much cheaper. An ancillary benefit is that it will generate enough heat for us to capture and produce 30. We'll initially produce 30 megawatts of power. That's our load, and when we go to phase 2, we're going to double that plant and produce 60 megawatts of power, which gives us a sellable product. We're going to generate power for the market. I know I went quick. Rich said you had like 2 minutes, so I just jammed, and I apologize for that. But we can dive into whatever details you'd like anytime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Got, at least on the agenda, one more item, and that's commission business. The next meeting is set for the 15th of August. I guess I should say August. Starting with last meeting, we tried to schedule 2 months ahead to assist staff in making sure they have facilities, and so we're set for August. The next meeting, I think, is usually, correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, is it November?
Yes.
Is there a location that anyone would be interested in having it at?
Sulphur, Nevada.
Well, the August meeting is, apparently, we're gonna have a tour of Highcroft.
Which is actually.
See, at Sulphur.
Nevada.
Sulfur.
That's the 15th, so that would be the after, probably 1 to 5 at the Winnemucca Courthouse, and I think that's already booked.
Yeah.
And then the following day, Friday, would be the tour. So, and would that be like drive up in the morning and then tour and then full day? No?
Probably 4 hours.
4 hours, okay. We'll plan it for that. Okay.
Yeah. Let's do early November.
What does Thursday, November 14th look like for everyone?
February.
What was that, November?
November, again, 14th?
Yeah.
Looks good here.
I'm not hearing any no's, so. Of course, people may still be getting to November. That's the idea.
And that would be in Carson City. Usually
Okay.
we have that one in Carson
Okay.
City, and we should have a room to do it.
Okay, sounds good. So 11/14 in Carson City.
And that, that may be a hearing too, if we can move some of
Yes,
these things
right.
forward.
Anything else for the good of the order? Meeting adjourned.
Don't we have to vote on it?
Mr. Chairman, you do have to do public comment last, even though you had an additional public comment first. So you gotta try one more time.
Thank you for that. I did not realize that that was one of the requirements. For the third time, any public comment? Hearing none, adjourned.
Thank you.